Chapter 759. Chu Fengmian was openly chasing after the little demon lord, so it was naturally impossible for the experts around the mountain range to know that someone had made a move to save the little demon lord. This spiritual energy pressed down on Chu Fengmian's body. The strength of this spiritual energy was beyond Chu Fengmian's imagination. The expert who made a move was much stronger than Soul Lock Demon Sovereign, Quake Dawn Demon Sovereign, and the others. His spiritual energy was simply bottomless. Especially since this person was also at the peak of life and death realm. He hadn't yet surpassed life and death realm and reached life shatter realm. However, the strength of his spiritual energy wasn't the slightest bit inferior to a true life shatter realm expert. Chu Fengmian was somewhat startled. He didn't expect that there would be such a terrifying figure in Heavenly Feather Divine Domain. But today, no matter who it was, he had to kill the little demon lord no matter what. If he didn't kill the little demon lord, it would be a huge problem in his heart. Sword aura. Sword intent suddenly erupted from Chu Fengmian's body. This sword intent was as sharp as a blade, completely cutting off the spiritual energy pressing down on his body. Chu Fengmian was freed from the suppression, and his sword light once again slashed towards the little demon lord. Oh? You're actually able to dissolve my suppression? When did Heavenly Feather Divine Domain have such a figure? And it's actually a sword cultivator? Not bad, Heavenly Feather Divine Domain finally has another sword cultivator. The mysterious voice resounded once again. Since you want to kill the little demon lord, I'll compete with you in the way of the sword. Suddenly, the spiritual energy pressing down on Chu Fengmian's body disappeared without a trace. Instead, a sword intent enveloped Chu Fengmian's body. This sword intent was as sharp as a sword. The moment it enveloped Chu Fengmian, its killing intent was revealed without any concealment. Waves of sword intent transformed into swords, aiming to kill Chu Fengmian. This sword intent, in particular, came from a distant place. Chu Fengmian could feel that the person who made the move wasn't nearby. Chu Fengmian was surprised that he was able to reach such a level of sword intent just by using his power to save the little demon lord. In the Heavenly Feather Divine region, only Sword Ancestor Desolate of the Tianjian sect, War God Deer of the Saint King sect, and Saint Desolate of the Ancient Desolate sect. War God Deer and Saint Desolate of the Ancient Desolate sect could not have such a sword will. Is your sword ancestor desolate? The moment he sensed the sword intent, Chu Fengmian suddenly understood the identity of the person who had attacked. In the Heavenly Feather Domain, only Sword Ancestor Huang, a super genius of the Tianjian sect, could do this. Sword Ancestor Desolate snorted coldly. Oh? I didn't expect you to know me. Judging from your strength, you must have killed all the disciples of the Tianjian sect. Chu Fengmian answered casually. So what if I am? So what if I'm not? Yes, you must die today. If you're not, I won't kill you for chasing after the little demon lord, but you must kneel down and destroy your own cultivation. Then, I can spare your life, Sword Ancestor Huang said coldly. Sword Ancestor Huang said coldly. His tone was like a supreme judgment, as if he wanted to pronounce Chu Fengmian's fate. That's right. So what if I'm the one who killed him? The people of the 7 major sects all deserve to die. Now that you're here to stop me, you must die too. Chu Fengmian spoke resolutely and decisively. His tone was filled with dense killing intent. So what if Sword Ancestor Huang was here? The people of the 7 major sects all had to die. Even if they were peerless geniuses, they would still be killed by Chu Fengmian. The people of the 7 major sects all deserve to die? Good. You're crazy. Sword Ancestor Desolate snorted coldly. His words sounded like a compliment, but each of his words contained a supreme sword intent. Suddenly, the sword intent that enveloped Chu Fengmian's body suddenly increased by countless times. Moreover, this killing intent was even more terrifying and contained even more murderous intent. Chu Fengmian's words aroused the anger in Sword Ancestor Huang's heart, making him want to kill. You want to kill me with just your sword intent? Should I say that you're arrogant or stupid? Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a disdainful smile as he faced the sword intent that enveloped him. There were only a few people who could defeat him in terms of swordsmanship, not to mention that he wanted to kill Chu Fengmian with just his sword intent. Even the sect master of the Tianjian sect might not be able to achieve this. Infinite sword intent. Chu Fengmian shouted lightly. The sword intent on his body also suddenly appeared. The sword aura on his body rose crazily and suddenly rushed to the sky. It was like a sleeping beast that suddenly woke up at this moment and wanted to tear apart the provoking ant in front of it. Break! Chu Fengmian's sword edge rushed to the sky and the sword intent that enveloped him was instantly broken. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's sword light also slashed towards the little demon lord. The little demon lord's body was immediately penetrated by the sword light and shattered into pieces. Chu Fengmian killed the little demon lord right in front of sword ancestor Huang. Bastard! A loud shout suddenly exploded from the sky. Sword ancestor Huang was completely enraged. He was burning with anger, and he could no longer suppress his anger. No one has ever dared to kill in front of me. Boy, I'm going to tear you to pieces. I'm going to destroy you completely. I'm going to make you suffer all the pain in the world. I'm going to let you know that your swordsmanship is nothing in front of me. Suddenly, countless sword intents condensed in the sky and gradually turned into a white-robed man. This white-robed man's face was like a sword, and his eyes were sharp. He seemed to be the incarnation of a sword. This was a state that could only be achieved by cultivating the swordsmanship to an extremely high level. The man and the sword became one. The man became the sword, and the sword became the man. Die! The moment the white-robed man condensed, he suddenly slashed his sword towards Chu Fengmian. The moment the sword slashed out, the surroundings seemed to have turned into a world of swords. Endless sword intents shrouded and suppressed Chu Fengmian's body, making it extremely difficult for Chu Fengmian to move. Chu Fengmian was trapped in the world of swords, and it seemed like he couldn't contend against the white-robed man. He couldn't dodge the sword attack even if he wanted to. If you want to kill me, let your true body come. You're just an incarnation condensed from a wisp of sword intent. How dare you act so presumptuously in front of me? I'll slash your incarnation and make you lose a wisp of sword intent. Chu Fengmian's body trembled. There seemed to be countless sword lights around him that suddenly flashed and shattered the world of swords around him. Hiss! At the same time, Chu Fengmian's body moved, and the ancestral dragon supreme sword suddenly came out of its sheath. A sword light suddenly slashed out. The two sword lights collided, and sword ancestor Huang's sword light was directly slashed apart. At the same time, the sword chi slashed towards sword ancestor Huang's incarnation. Chu Fengmian sneered. This incarnation has condensed a lot of your sword intent. Killing it will also damage your strength. Chapter 760. Sword Dao Solipsism. No one in this world can compete with me. Chu Fengmian let out a long roar. The sword intent on his body suddenly condensed to the extreme. A brilliant light burst out from the tip of his sword, forming a supreme sword chi. It suddenly slashed towards sword ancestor Desolate's body. The sword suddenly hit sword ancestor Desolation's incarnation. Sword ancestor Desolation also felt the terror of Chu Fengmian's sword and hurriedly wanted to retreat. However, his speed was no match for Chu Fengmian's sword light. Kid, you're indeed very strong. You're the first person to force me to this point with Sword Dao. However, you'll never be my opponent. Sword Ancestor Desolation's voice suddenly rang out. A tunnel suddenly opened up in the sky. It seemed like Sword Ancestor Desolation's body was pouring endless power into the incarnation, trying to save it. Chu Fengmian was right. The incarnation was the condensation of Sword Ancestor Desolation's sword intent. If Chu Fengmian really killed it, Sword Ancestor Desolation's strength would definitely be damaged. Sword Ancestor Desolation would definitely not sit idly by. Want to save it? It's better to leave this incarnation behind. Chu Fengmian sneered. His sword shone once again, turning into a sword light that soared into the sky. It directly followed the tunnel and killed Sword Ancestor Desolation's body. Boom! Under the sword, the tunnel suddenly collapsed and was destroyed by the sword chi. However, it did not hurt Sword Ancestor Desolation's body. At the last moment, Sword Ancestor Desolation still closed the tunnel so that Chu Fengmian's sword chi could not hurt his body. However, this way, he would not be able to take the incarnation away. Die! Chu Fengmian's sword light flashed. Sword Ancestor Desolation's incarnation was completely shattered under Chu Fengmian's sword light. The sword intent on his body was completely devoured by Chu Fengmian. Very well, kid. I didn't expect that there would be another person who could contend with me in the sinkhole sky. Today, I won't use my real body. Consider it a chance for me to spare your life. The next time I see you, I will definitely kill you. Sword Ancestor Desolation's voice came from the sky, sounding extremely furious. Now that his incarnation had been killed by Chu Fengmian, it was a great humiliation to Sword Ancestor Desolate. The next time they meet, there will be a bloody battle between Sword Ancestor Huang and Chu Fengmian. The next time we meet, I will not only kill your incarnation. Instead, I will kill your actual body. Chu Fengmian said coldly after hearing Sword Ancestor Desolate's words. But today, Chu Fengmian didn't want to continue fighting. Chu Fengmian had just subdued the heavenly demon treasure chariot, and the chariot was still attacking the suppression. Chu Fengmian had to divert his attention to deal with the heavenly demon treasure chariot. Therefore, this time, Chu Fengmian didn't really plan to fight to the death with Sword Ancestor Desolate. It was better to wait until he completely suppressed and refined the heavenly devil treasure carriage before coming to fight Sword Ancestor Desolate. During this battle, Chu Fengmian felt that there were at least dozens of spiritual consciousnesses observing this battle. With so many people watching, Chu Fengmian had to find a place to completely refine the heavenly demon treasure carriage. This time, the greatest benefit Chu Fengmian gained from killing the little demon lord was the heavenly demon treasure chariot. The people of Nine Demon City probably didn't expect that the little demon lord would actually fall in the returning ruined sky. In the returning ruined sky, the little demon lord had the protection of the disciples of Nine Demon City and the heavenly demon treasure chariot. It could be said that no one could hurt the little demon lord. Because of this, the old antiques of Nine Demon City were relieved to let the little demon lord bring the heavenly demon treasure chariot to the returning ruined sky. But the people of Nine Demon City didn't expect that there would be an anomaly, and that was Chu Fengmian. The heavenly demon treasure chariot fell into Chu Fengmian's hands. Let's go! Chu Fengmian moved and directly left the place, returning to the palace where Nine Demon City's encampment was located. On the other side, on another tall mountain peak, in the largest palace, an angry roar suddenly sounded. Damn it! Damn it! A mere brat from the northern region dared to kill my incarnation. The roar came from the white-robed man, Sword Ancestor Huang. Now that his incarnation had been killed by Chu Fengmian, he was furious to the extreme. Sword Ancestor Huang had roamed the Heavenly Feather Divine territory for decades and had never suffered such a loss. Senior brother Sword, weren't you in seclusion? What happened? In the surrounding palaces, the disciples of the Tianjian sect heard Sword Ancestor Huang's roar and came to ask in surprise. The little demon lord is dead, and my incarnation was also killed by a brat. Sword Ancestor Huang said coldly. The martial artists of our Tianjian sect who entered the returning ruined sky were all killed by this brat. What? Who is it? How dare he kill the people of our Tianjian sect? And the little demon lord, didn't he say that he brought the treasure of Nine Demon City, the heavenly demon treasure chariot? How could he have been killed? The heavenly demon treasure chariot was also taken away. Senior brother Sword's incarnation was killed by this brat. This brat is a great enemy of our Tianjian sect. We can't let him leave alive. The disciples of the Tianjian sect were furious and shocked when they heard Sword Ancestor Huang's words. Senior brother Sword, what should we do? A disciple of the Tianjian sect asked Sword Ancestor Huang respectfully. Should we send some people to kill this brat? No. This brat is too strong. If we act rashly, it won't be easy to deal with him. Moreover, the Cloud Feather Palace is going to open soon. We don't have the time to deal with this brat now. Sword Ancestor Huang was silent for a moment. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said, I have to make a breakthrough before the Cloud Feather Palace opens. As long as I surpass the life and death realm and reach the life shatterer realm, War God Deer and Divine Lord Huang will be nothing but ants. I can also kill that brat directly. Then, all the treasures of the Cloud Feather Palace will belong to our Tianjian sect. Sword Ancestor Huang looked at a disciple of the Tianjian sect and said, Didn't you say that a woman with an innate divine body entered the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain? Where is she now? Senior Brother Sword, that woman's strength is very strange. She has escaped from our encirclement many times. Now, she has escaped to the Ice Rift Valley. She must have been seriously injured. The disciple of the Tianjian sect replied. Our Tianjian sect disciples have surrounded the Ice Rift Valley and are preparing to capture that woman. We have to be quick. As long as I devour the origin of an innate divine body, I will be able to make a breakthrough. Then, I will be able to kill everyone. Sword Ancestor Huang sneered. Let's go to the Ice Rift Valley. Sword Ancestor Huang waved his hand and used his movement technique to leave the palace. Chapter 761. Young Master, did you fight with Sword Ancestor Desolate? In the palace of Nine Demons City, Blood Demon Venerable asked in surprise when he saw Chu Fengmian's return. Although he didn't chase after Chu Fengmian to observe the battle, he could clearly feel the sword intent that erupted from afar. In Heavenly Feather Divine Domain, only Sword Ancestor Desolate could possess such a sword intent apart from Chu Fengmian. That's right. When I was chasing after the little demon lord, I happened to encounter the incarnation of Sword Ancestor Desolate's sword intent. Chu Fengmian said. However, I've already killed his incarnation, and I've also killed the little demon master. Young Master, you killed Sword Ancestor Desolate's sword intent incarnation? Blood Demon Venerable asked in surprise. He naturally knew about Sword Ancestor Desolate's prestige in Heavenly Feather Divine Domain. He knew how powerful Sword Ancestor Desolate was. Even this sword intent incarnation was much more powerful than many peak life and death experts. Yet, Chu Fengmian had actually killed this sword intent incarnation. Blood Demon Venerable thought for a moment and said in a deep voice. Given Sword Ancestor Desolate's character, he definitely won't let you off after you killed his sword intent incarnation. Don't worry. Since I can kill this incarnation, I'm not afraid of Sword Ancestor Desolate's true body. Chu Fengmian said confidently. He had killed the little demon lord and countless demon venerables. Their essence blood had all been obtained by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian could feel that his strength would soon improve. Moreover, Chu Fengmian had obtained the heavenly demon treasured carriage. As long as Chu Fengmian could refine it, it would mean that he had obtained a spiritual tool that was comparable to the ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword. Even if he encountered Sword Ancestor Desolate's true body, Chu Fengmian wouldn't be afraid. By the way, young master, I've received another piece of news. Blood Demon Venerable suddenly said. It's said that a woman with an innate divine body has appeared in Heavenly Feather Divine Domain. Now, the 7 major sects and countless forces in Heavenly Feather Divine Domain are trying to capture this woman. What do you think? A woman with an innate divine body? Chu Fengmian's heart tightened when he heard the news. What kind of woman is she? Do you know? I don't know the exact situation, but according to the rumors, this woman should be a sword cultivator. Her sword skills are superb and she has already killed many disciples of the 7 sections. She is still being hunted by the 7 sects and has been on the run. Blood Demon Venerable said respectfully. Sword Ancestor Wilds from the Heaven Sword sect, War God Deer from the Sage Monarch sect, and Sage Emperor Wilds from the House of the Desolate Ancient. All of them want to take her pre-heaven essence, break through the limits of life and death, and step into the life-saving level. Sword Cultivator. Hearing this, Chu Fengmian was almost certain that this woman's identity was Han Yueli. Other than that, it was almost impossible to find such a coincidence. From the looks of it, Han Yueli had also come to the Heavenly Feather God domain. It was unknown how she had gotten into a conflict with the people from the 7 great sections. The innate divine body was a huge treasure trove. Whoever could get the innate origin from it would be a great fortune. Now that Han Yueli had entered the Heavenly Feather divine realm, it was simply like a lamb entering the mouth of a tiger. Fortunately, Han Yueli was not completely powerless. She was able to escape from the pursuit of the disciples of the 7 major sections. It seemed like Han Yueli had gained quite a lot of benefits in the sinkhole sky. Even so, how could one person fight against the 7 major sects? No matter how strong Han Yueli was, she would be cornered. Do you know where that woman is? Chu Fengmian asked. This subordinate doesn't know. This woman has been hiding all this time and her whereabouts are unknown. However, this subordinate will go and find out more information. Blood Demon Venerable replied. Come back and report to me if you have any news about her. Chu Fengmian ordered. Yes. The Blood Demon Lord replied. With a flash of his body, he left to scout for more information. Damn it. The 7 major sects dared to chase after Han Yueli. Well, it seems like I didn't take the initiative to kill them, but they came to provoke me. Chu Fengmian's eyes were incomparably cold. He didn't want to start a massacre, but it seemed like the 7 major sects deserved to die. Now that Chu Fengmian had passed the life and death tribulation, he wasn't afraid of any life and death realm martial artists. Be it Sword Ancestor Desolate or War God Deer, whoever dared to provoke Chu Fengmian would die. But now, I have to find Han Yueli as soon as possible. I don't know how long she can last under the siege of the 7 major sections. Chu Fengmian thought inwardly. But without any clues, Chu Fengmian could only send Blood Demon Venerable out to find out more information. After all, Blood Demon Venerable was a local tyrant in Heavenly Feather domain. He could gather information much faster than Chu Fengmian. Not to mention, Chu Fengmian had another thing to do. Now, Chu Fengmian was still suppressing the Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage. He had to continuously use spirit energy to suppress it. If he didn't refine the carriage, he would be distracted at all times. Now, he had to refine the carriage first. Chu Fengmian's mind quickly calmed down, and he prepared to refine the carriage. Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and the Heavenly Demon Treasured Carriage appeared in the palace. Countless seals surrounded the carriage, tightly trapping it. Otherwise, the Heavenly Demon Treasured Carriage would have struggled free from Chu Fengmian's grasp. Fortunately, the 8 heavenly demons in the Heavenly Demon Treasured Carriage had been refined by the Little Demon Lord. The Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage was at its weakest, so Chu Fengmian could easily subdue it. Boom! Boom! However, just when the Heavenly Demon Treasured Carriage was at its weakest, it displayed a terrifying might. Waves of spirit energy rushed out, trying to break free from Chu Fengmian's grasp. The Heavenly Demon Treasured Carriage is worthy of being a spirit weapon comparable to the ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword. It has such power even after losing its master. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh. Fortunately, when Chu Fengmian was collecting the ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword, because Chu Fengmian had the bloodline of the ancient battle dragon, the ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword felt close to Chu Fengmian. That was why Chu Fengmian could easily collect the ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword. But now, it was obviously not comparable to the Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage. The Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage was a genuine demonic weapon. It had been passed down from 9 Demon City for tens of thousands of years. It was engraved with the marks of the 9 Demon City's demon lords, and its demonic intent was overwhelming. When Chu Fengmian wanted to collect the Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage, the marks of the demon lords were enough to burst out a terrifying power to resist Chu Fengmian. Chapter 762. It seems that if I want to subdue the Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage, I must first get rid of its demonic nature. Chu Fengmian observed for a while and saw that the Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage had the imprints of the past demon masters. It had an extremely strong demonic nature. Unless it was the demon master of the 9 Demon City, no one could subdue it and drive it. If Chu Fengmian wanted to subdue the Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage, he must first get rid of the imprints left behind by the past demon masters. Battle Dragon's Might. Chu Fengmian thought of this and his mind suddenly moved. Endless Dragon's Might shrouded the heavenly demon treasure carriage. Woo woo woo. The heavenly demon treasure carriage felt the suppression of Chu Fengmian's Dragon's Might. Endless demonic will shrouded the heavenly demon treasure carriage and actively resisted the Dragon's Might. The heavenly demon treasure carriage was definitely the most difficult spiritual weapon to subdue that Chu Fengmian had ever seen. What a strong power! Without a master, a spiritual weapon alone has such strong power. If it can be of use to me, it will be of great use to me. Seeing the heavenly demon treasure carriage's resistance, Chu Fengmian's face showed some joy. The stronger the heavenly demon treasure carriage's power, the more advantageous it was for Chu Fengmian. As long as Chu Fengmian could subdue the heavenly demon treasure carriage, all of its power would be used by Chu Fengmian. An ownerless spirit artifact wants to contend against me? Suppress it! Chu Fengmian roared angrily. The ancient battle dragon's blood essence in his body burned. The dragon's might that erupted from Chu Fengmian's body instantly became 10 times stronger than before and shrouded the heavenly demon treasure carriage. Under the suppression of the dragon's might, the heavenly demon treasure carriage was gradually suppressed. No matter how strong the heavenly demon treasure carriage was, it was still a spiritual weapon. A spiritual weapon without a master could not cause much trouble. Now, under Chu Fengmian's dragon's might, it was completely suppressed. Now, it was only waiting for Chu Fengmian to refine and subdue it. The imprints of the past demon masters are difficult to deal with. Chu Fengmian could still suppress the power of the heavenly demon treasure carriage. However, the most crucial point if he wanted to refine the heavenly demon treasure carriage, was to break all the imprints of the past demon masters on it. Otherwise, Chu Fengmian wouldn't have been able to refine it. However, the past generations of 9 demon cities' demon masters could be considered the pinnacle of the 9 domains. The imprints they had left behind were not easy to deal with. Chu Fengmian felt that once he wanted to destroy the engravings of the past demon masters, the power contained in the engravings of the past demon masters would burst out. Compared to the past demon masters of 9 demon city, the current Chu Fengmian could only be regarded as an ant. Even if it was just one of the engravings, Chu Fengmian could not be underestimated. Roar! 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 While Chu Fengmian was pondering, the heavenly demon treasure carriage suppressed by Chu Fengmian's draconic might suddenly roared crazily. These roars were the roars of heavenly demons. It seemed to be unwilling to be suppressed by Chu Fengmian. It was still frantically gathering power, trying to break free from Chu Fengmian's suppression. I don't believe that I can't subdue you with just a spiritual weapon. If I can't even destroy the engravings of the past devil masters, how can I kill my way into the 7 great sects and kill the devil masters? Chu Fengmian coldly snorted in his heart. What he wanted to do was to completely destroy the 7 great sects, and the devil masters were also people he must kill. Now, in front of the small engravings, how could Chu Fengmian shrink back? Creation. From Chu Fengmian's hand, a surge of creation power suddenly condensed. He communicated with his natal sword origin, and all the power of creation power condensed into a sword of creation in Chu Fengmian's hand. I don't believe that the power of the past demon masters is enough to compete with the power of creation power. Chu Fengmian coldly snorted, and the sword of creation was directly inserted into the heavenly demon treasure carriage. It suddenly pierced towards the engravings of the past demon masters. The moment the sword of creation pierced into the heavenly demon treasure carriage, waves of shocking demonic aura suddenly appeared. These waves of demonic aura turned into countless heavenly demons, roaring and rushing towards Chu Fengmian, as if they wanted to kill him. However, the moment these heavenly demons condensed, countless sword lights also appeared. This sword of creation cut down the demons with one slash, and the countless heavenly demons that had just condensed were all killed by the sword of creation. These heavenly demons were all condensed from the engravings of the past demon masters on the heavenly demon treasure carriage. Now that they were killed by the sword of creation, Chu Fengmian could feel that the power of the engravings of the past demon masters on the heavenly demon treasure carriage had decreased by a lot. Great! The engravings of the past demon masters are about to be completely destroyed. Chu Fengmian laughed loudly, and once again activated his spiritual energy. The Sword of Creation's aura was even more powerful, and it completely destroyed all the demonic aura within the heavenly demon treasure carriage. The demonic nature of the heavenly demon treasure carriage gradually dissipated under the Sword of Creation's attack, and it gradually changed from a demonic artifact to an ordinary spiritual artifact. The power of the heavenly demon treasure carriage mostly relies on the demonic aura within. Now that the demonic aura is gone, its power has decreased by more than half. However, it's just right. I'll refine it now, and imprint my own engravings on it, so that the heavenly demon treasure carriage will completely belong to me. Chu Fengmian saw the changes in the heavenly demon treasure carriage, and suddenly roared. From his fingertips, drops of golden blood suddenly appeared, and poured into the heavenly demon treasure carriage. Suddenly, the heavenly demon treasure carriage was surrounded by countless dragon power. At the place where the 8 heavenly demons used to pull the carriage, 8 ancient battle dragons suddenly condensed. The battle dragon treasure carriage. There was no longer any demonic aura on the heavenly demon treasure carriage, only the purest dragon power. The battle dragons were pulling the carriage. The power of these 8 ancient battle dragons was much stronger than the 8 heavenly demons back then. In Chu Fengmian's hands, the current power of the heavenly demon treasure carriage was more powerful than when it was in the hands of the little demon lord. From today onwards, the heavenly demon treasure carriage shall be renamed the battle dragon treasure carriage, and become my ride. Chu Fengmian laughed loudly, and sat on the battle dragon treasure carriage. On the battle dragon treasure carriage, a tall throne suddenly appeared, and Chu Fengmian sat on it. He was now the only owner of the battle dragon treasure carriage. Now that the heavenly demon treasure carriage was subdued by Chu Fengmian, and turned into the battle dragon treasure carriage, Chu Fengmian was overjoyed, and his confidence doubled. The current power of the battle dragon treasure carriage was comparable to the ancestral dragon's supreme sword. Now, Chu Fengmian had the black mysterious sword formation, the ancestral dragon's supreme sword, and the battle dragon treasure carriage, these 3 supreme spiritual artifacts. In the heavenly wing of the divine realm, who could compete with Chu Fengmian? Now that Chu Fengmian had subdued the battle dragon treasure carriage, it was time for the battle dragon treasure carriage to be born and see blood. The blood of the disciples of the 7 major sects was the most suitable. Chapter 763. Young Master. Chu Fengmian had just subdued the war dragon chariot when a crimson figure rushed over from outside the palace. It was the bloody blood demon. I've already found out about Miss Han's news. Speak. Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. If anything happened to Han Yueli, everyone in the heavenly feather divine domain would be buried with her. Miss Han has now escaped into the Ice Rift Valley. She had a fight with the people from the Sky Sword sect some time ago. The people from the Sky Sword sect seem to have discovered her tracks. However, Sword Ancestor Huang wasn't there at that time, so Miss Han was able to escape. The bloody blood demon reported in detail. However, Sword Ancestor Huang has personally led people to the Ice Rift Valley. I'm afraid Miss Han will be in great danger. The Tianjian sect and the 7 major sects wanted to capture Han Yueli. It was obvious that they wanted Han Yueli's innate divine body. Chu Fengmian originally thought that given Han Yueli's strength, there shouldn't be many cultivators in the returning ruined sky who were strong enough to deal with her. That was why he felt more at ease. He didn't expect that there would be so many hidden experts in the heavenly feather divine domain. This put Han Yueli in danger. Fortunately, Chu Fengmian had also come to the heavenly feather divine domain. It wasn't too late. The Ice Rift Valley is indeed here. Hearing the name, Chu Fengmian guessed that Han Yueli was most likely in the Ice Rift Valley. The Ice Rift Valley was a dangerous place in the heavenly feather divine domain. It was extremely cold all year round, and only a few ice attribute sacred herbs could be found there. Ordinary cultivators wouldn't enter it rashly. Only those who needed ice attribute sacred herbs would enter it. Han Yueli must have been injured when she was attacked by the 7 major sects. She had a profound frost body, so ice attributes sacred herbs were the best medicine for her. That was why Hanueli had chosen to hide in the Ice Rift Valley. Chu Fengmian had guessed it, and this news had confirmed his guess. Sword Ancestor Huang has already brought people over. Looks like there's no time to delay. Let's go, Chu Fengmian said in a deep voice. He got Blood Devil Monarch to board the carriage and turned into a beam of light, rushing towards the Ice Rift Valley. With the Battle Dragon treasured carriage, the speed of travel was much faster than when he used his movement technique. As long as there was an endless supply of spiritual energy, the Battle Dragon treasured carriage's speed wouldn't be slower than an ordinary martial artist. The Ice Rift Valley was located at the edge of the Heavenly Feather Divine region. Ordinary martial artists would need at least 2 to 3 days to reach it. However, with the speed of the War Dragon treasure carriage, Chu Fengmian arrived at the Ice Rift Valley in just 2 hours. As they approached the Ice Rift Valley, they could feel a kind of cold that pierced their bones. Even the martialists found it hard to resist. Even life and death realm martial artists would freeze to death inside if they didn't come out within 10 days or half a month. Therefore, very few martial artists would enter the Ice Rift Valley for no reason. However, this time, with the news of Hanueli, the Ice Rift Valley gradually became more lively. Innate godly body was a treasure that everyone wanted, especially Sword Ancestor Huang. He was only one step away from transcending life and death and stepping into the life-shattering realm. What he lacked was an opportunity. The innate godly body was the best opportunity for him to break through. Because of this, almost all the disciples of the Tianjin sect had come out, making the quiet Ice Rift Valley a lot more lively. Apart from the disciples of the Tianjin sect and the 7 great sects, many disciples of other forces also came to the Ice Rift Valley to try their luck. Many of them had ordinary aptitudes. If they could obtain the power of the innate godly body, they would have the aptitude of the innate godly body and soar to the sky. There were definitely many martial artists who wanted to join in the fun like this. Along the way, Chu Fengmian saw many people who wanted to try their luck and obtain Hanueli's innate source. These people deserved to die. Chu Fengmian's eyes were full of killing intent. He couldn't wait to kill everyone in the Ice Rift Valley and leave no one alive. However, Hanueli hadn't been found yet, so Hanueli's safety was the most important thing. He didn't pay attention to these martial artists and drove the treasured carriage deeper into the Ice Rift Valley. The deeper he went into the Ice Rift Valley, the more violent the snowstorm became, forcing Chu Fengmian to move forward slowly. "Senior brother Jian, can't you do anything to that woman? Do you need us to hurry over?" Suddenly, a group of martial artists appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. There were about 7 or 8 of them, all dressed in white and holding spiritual swords. Their bodies were full of sharp sword intent. They were the disciples of the Tianjin sect. When Chu Fengmian saw this group of martial artists, he quietly concealed his spiritual power and followed them. "It's not that we can't deal with that woman. It's just that senior brother Jian wants to obtain her innate source. It's easy to kill her, but if he wants to obtain her innate source, he must capture her alive," another disciple of the Tianjin sect said with a cold smile. "It's said that the woman has creamy skin and a beautiful face. Perhaps senior brother Jian wants to capture her and keep her as a slave." "That's true. It's best to get both the treasure and the beauty." Another disciple of the Tianjin sect laughed and said, "Let's not talk about this for now. Let's hurry over. Otherwise, senior brother Jian will blame us for being late." "Okay." The other disciples of the Tianjin sect nodded and directly rushed to the center of the Ice Rift Valley. "Follow them." Chu Fengmian hid his aura and followed the disciples of the Tianjin sect closely. His eyes were full of killing intent. This sword ancestor desolate and a disciple of the Tianjin sect were going to die today. How could Chu Fengmian let others spy on his woman? Today was the day for Chu Fengmian to kill. Chu Fengmian followed the disciples of the Tianjin sect. After half an hour, they arrived at the depths of the Ice Rift Valley. In front of a glacier, a blue-clothed woman was standing on it. Beside the blue-clothed woman, there were 20 or 30 disciples of the Tianjin sect. The white-clothed man, sword ancestor desolate, was among them. Chu Fengmian looked at her and recognized her at a glance. This woman was Hanueli. Hanueli, you don't have to struggle anymore. Just submit to me obediently. If you submit to me obediently, I can take your innate source energy and leave you with your life. How about it? Sword Ancestor Desolate looked at Hanueli and shouted coldly. Chapter 764. Sword Ancestor Huang. Hanueli looked at the person who spoke. With a single glance, she could tell that the strength of this Sword Ancestor Desolate was much stronger than most of the warriors in the Heavenly Feather Divine region. In the Heavenly Feather domain, there weren't many warriors who could compete with Sword Ancestor Huang. Hanueli had heard of Sword Ancestor Huang's name since he came to the Heavenly Feather domain. He knew how powerful Sword Ancestor Huang was. That's right, it's me, Hanueli. I don't want to kill you today because you have no enmity with the Tianjin sect. As long as you choose to submit to me, I can spare your life. Sword Ancestor Huang looked at Hanueli and sneered. His tone was domineering and arrogant. Submit to you? I've never submitted to anyone. Please go back. Hanueli said coldly. Now, do you think there are any other possibilities for you apart from the path of submission? Sword Ancestor Huang suddenly sneered at Hanueli. He looked at Hanueli and said, I know who you are. You're a disciple of the Biming Academy. The Biming Academy can only be considered a second-rate sect in the 9 regions. In front of the Tianjin sect, it's like an ant. If I kill you, the Biming Academy won't dare to say anything. Kneel down and submit to me. That's your only way out. As long as you become my woman and serve me wholeheartedly, I can let you enter the Tianjin sect. It's 100 times better than the Biming Academy. Don't even think about it. After Hanueli heard Sword Ancestor Desolate's words, she only spat out these 2 words indifferently. Is that so? If that's the case, then I'll capture you and subdue you. Sword Ancestor Huang suddenly shouted coldly. The countless Tianjin sect disciples beside him accepted the order. Suddenly, countless sword lights slashed towards Hanueli. The sword chi that filled the sky instantly covered the surrounding glaciers. This time, Sword Ancestor Huang had brought all the disciples of the Tianjin sect with him. He had already surrounded the area around the glacier. Now, even if Hanueli had wings, it would be difficult for him to escape. There was no chance for him to escape. Ice love. Hanueli's eyes were cold. Holding the spirit sword in his hand, he suddenly slashed out, and the sky was filled with ice flowers. Today, she would rather die than choose to submit. In the sinkhole sky, Hanueli had a huge territory. Her cultivation base had already reached the 7th level of life and death realm, and her strength had vaguely surpassed Jian Sungqiong and the others. Now that she was besieged, there wasn't the slightest trace of fear on her face. The sky was filled with ice swords, dancing one after another, and fighting with the countless Tianjin sect disciples. Ice Lotus Sword Art. It is said that this sword art once belonged to the master of Sword Dao. Even our Tianjin sect doesn't have records of this sword art. Now that we have captured this woman, we can also obtain a sword art for our Tianjin sect. Sword Ancestor Huang coldly snorted. Don't worry about injuring her. As long as she doesn't die, our Tianjin sect has pills to save her. We just need to capture her quickly. Yes. When the surrounding Tianjin sect disciples heard Sword Ancestor Huang's order, their faces revealed a bit of ruthlessness, and they attacked again. They were afraid of injuring Hanueli, so they had been suppressing their strength. Now that they heard Sword Ancestor Huang's order, they all used their full strength. Among them, 5 Tianjin sect disciples suddenly joined forces and condensed 1,000 Jianwang sword chi. It suddenly fell from the sky, and slashed towards Hanueli, 1,000 Frozen City. When Hanueli saw the 1,000 Jianwang sword chi falling, her face revealed a bit of a dignified expression. She hurriedly condensed her spiritual energy, and slashed out with her sword. Suddenly, the sky in front of her was frozen. In this ice rift valley, Hanueli was able to use the surrounding coldness to erupt with an extremely strong power, which was enough to deal with the siege of the 7 sections. This is really troublesome. This woman's sword art is like a tiger that has grown wings in this ice rift valley. It is not easy to deal with. When Sword Ancestor Huang saw this scene, he thought coldly in his heart. Now is not the time to delay. Otherwise, the Sage Monarch sect and the Ancient Desolate sect will be here soon. A long night is full of dreams. Thinking of this, Sword Ancestor Huang's body suddenly moved. The sword in his hand suddenly came out, and a sword chi slashed towards Hanueli. Sword Ancestor Huang finally could not hold back and personally took action. His sword chi was 10,000 Jianwang. When it swept down, the ice in front of Hanueli was instantly shattered. Hanueli's body continuously retreated, avoiding the sharp edge of the sword. Great! Senior brother Huang is invincible. When the surrounding Tianjian sect disciples saw Sword Ancestor Huang take action, they all laughed loudly. Hanueli, since you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit, then don't blame me for not showing mercy to you. But don't worry, I won't kill you. I still want you to serve me. Sword Ancestor Huang looked at Hanueli and smiled coldly. Once again, he slashed his sword towards Hanueli. The sword chi that blotted out the sky and covered the earth came crashing down. The terrifying sword chi even cracked the surrounding glaciers. Sword Ancestor Huang. Who do you think you are? How dare you have designs on my woman? Looks like killing one of your incarnations is not enough to teach you a lesson. Suddenly, an incomparably powerful force descended from the sky. A treasured carriage descended from the sky, pulled by battle dragons. For a moment, the carriage was filled with endless dragon aura. As the 8 battle dragons on the treasured carriage suddenly roared, all the sword chi in the surrounding was shattered. Even Sword Ancestor Huang took a few steps back, avoiding the sharp edge. A figure was sitting on the heavenly demon treasured carriage. This figure was Chu Fengmian. He sat on the treasure carriage, looking down at everyone. Chu Fengmian? Hanueli saw Chu Fengmian sitting on the treasure carriage. Her face was filled with joy. The tense expression that had been on her face all this time was now much more relaxed. It was like the ice had melted. Her face revealed a smile. I'm a little late. I've made you suffer. Chu Fengmian looked at Hanueli and said softly. He waved his hand and Hanueli landed on the battle dragon treasure carriage. But don't worry. These people will die one by one today. Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with killing intent. Now, Sword Ancestor Huang and the others actually had designs on Hanueli. They had touched Chu Fengmian's reverse scale. All of them would die today. Not a single one would be left alive. Where did this wild kid come from? Who do you think you are? A mere 4th-level life and death realm cultivator dares to oppose our Tianjian sect? You're courting death. A Tianjian sect disciple sized up Chu Fengmian's cultivation with disdain on his face. His body suddenly moved, and he slashed at Chu Fengmian with his sword. Chu Fengmian saw the Tianjian sect disciples attack and coldly snorted. The 8 ancient battle dragons he sat on suddenly roared, and an incomparably huge dragon claw blasted out. The Tianjian sect disciple's chest was directly smashed by the dragon claw, turning into a pile of flesh and blood. He died on the spot. Chapter 765. These disciples of the Tianjian sect were warriors who had obtained many fortuitous encounters in the heavenly feather god domain. None of them were weaker than the Jiansangqiong. Now, this Tianjian sect disciple had attacked. Chu Fengmian didn't even move. He just used his mind to activate the treasure carriage and kill this person. All the disciples of the Tianjian sect couldn't help but take a few steps back. They didn't dare to take the brunt of the attack. Who is this person? How can he have such terrifying strength? Is there such a person in the heavenly feather god domain? The other disciples of the Tianjian sect were shocked when they saw this scene. They couldn't imagine that someone could have such strength. Especially the power of this treasured carriage. It was much more powerful than an ordinary heavenly-grade spiritual weapon. The heavenly demon treasured carriage. You actually subdued this heavenly demon treasured carriage? Sword Ancestor Huang was shocked when he saw Chu Fengmian's treasure carriage. He knew the origin of the heavenly demon treasure carriage. It was engraved with the seals of the 9 demon cities' demon masters. It was said that only the 9 demon cities' demon masters were qualified to use it. He didn't expect that the heavenly demon treasured carriage had been subdued by Chu Fengmian. Bastard! Chu Fengmian, you're just one person, yet you dare to oppose our Sky Sword sect? Perfect! Since you want to save this woman today, I'll kill you first. Then, I'll show you how I'll take her innate source energy. Sword Ancestor Huang looked at Chu Fengmian and shouted angrily. Kill this man! Kill! They, the disciples of the Sky Sword sect, had never been killed in public like this. These disciples of the Sky Sword sect hated Chu Fengmian so much that they gnashed their teeth. Hearing Sword Ancestor Desolate's order, they suddenly attacked together. The surrounding disciples of the Tianjin sect shouted angrily. Countless sword lights suddenly shrouded Chu Fengmian. Kill me? You're just a group of ants. How dare you? The Tianjin sect is nothing. The 7 major sects will be destroyed by me sooner or later. Today, I'll kill all of you first, and then I'll kill all the other disciples of the 7 sects in the Heavenly Feather Divine region. Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. With a thought, the battle dragon chariot let out another roar. The umbrella on the carriage opened up, and a 7-colored light shrouded the heavenly demon treasure carriage. Countless sword lights slashed on the umbrella, but they were all blocked by the umbrella. The dozens of disciples of the Tianjin sect attacked at the same time, displaying countless sword techniques and slashing at Chu Fengmian. However, they were all blocked by the rainbow-colored light. They couldn't hurt Chu Fengmian at all. This heavenly demon treasure carriage was worthy of being called the most valuable treasure of 9 Demon City. Now that it had been refined by Chu Fengmian, its power was several times greater than in the hands of the little demon lord. The rainbow-colored light enveloped Chu Fengmian, placing him in an invincible position. Yueli, have a good rest. Watch how I kill all these people. Chu Fengmian said coldly. The rainbow-colored light around him suddenly dispersed. Chu Fengmian leaped out with the ancestral dragon supreme sword in hand. Good chance. Kill. Heavenly Dipper Sword Array. The disciples of the Tianjin sect all attacked at the same time when they saw this scene. Countless sword lights intertwined and turned into 36 Supreme Sword Chi. They formed the Heavenly Dipper Sword Array and slashed at Chu Fengmian. The countless sword lights were extremely spectacular. Every disciple of the Tianjin sect was an expert swordsman. Now they attacked together, forming a sword array that was extremely sharp. Break! Facing the attack of the sword array, Chu Fengmian only spat out one word indifferently. Suddenly, the sword in his hand flashed, and a sword edge suddenly pierced forward. This sword edge pierced forward as if it was unstoppable. Countless sword chi slashed at it, but they couldn't stop its sharpness. As the sword edge slashed at the sword array, the eye of the Heavenly Dipper sword array was broken. What kind of swordsmanship is this? Countless disciples of the Tianjin sect were shocked. They had joined forces to set up the Heavenly Dipper sword array in order to kill Chu Fengmian. But now, not only was the Heavenly Dipper sword array not destroyed by Chu Fengmian, but it was broken by Chu Fengmian's sword. Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship alone was better than all of them. How dare the Tianjin sect call itself a swordsmanship sect? It's just an insult to the word sword. Chu Fengmian shouted coldly. His body suddenly moved like a ferocious tiger out of the mountain. His sword edge was like a dragon, and he suddenly unsheathed it. This sword light was about to shatter the surrounding space. The space in the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain was many times stronger than the space in the 9 domains. But now, it was almost shattered by Chu Fengmian's sword edge. This sword light directly slashed at countless disciples of the Tianjin sect. Puff! A mist of blood rose up into the air as 8 of the Heavenly Sword sect disciples were killed on the spot by the sword. The disciples of the Tianjian sect were all geniuses of the 9 domains. Those who could come to the returning ruined sky were all people who had fought their way through the martial competition. But now, Chu Fengmian had killed 8 of them with a single strike of his sword. Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and all the blood essence in the mists of blood was absorbed by Chu Fengmian. He directly swallowed and refined it into his body. The spiritual swords in their hands were also taken by Chu Fengmian and integrated into the black mysterious sword array. After swallowing countless Jingsu, Chu Fengmian's aura was even stronger than before. Damn it! Beast! Seeing Chu Fengmian kill 8 disciples of the Tianjian sect with a single sword strike, Sword Ancestor Huang finally couldn't hold back and suddenly attacked. The moment the spiritual sword in his hand was unsheathed, dazzling sword light filled the surrounding space. Sword Ancestor Huang looked like an unsheathed sword. His eyes were filled with dense killing intent like a sword light. Suddenly, he took a step forward. The moment the spiritual sword in Sword Ancestor Huang's hand was unsheathed, it directly slashed at Chu Fengmian. This sword strike seemed to contain Sword Ancestor Huang's entire strength. All of his strength was integrated into the sword. He was like a sword, and the sword was like a person. This was the realm of man in sword unity, which was extremely high attainments in Sword Dao. Countless Sword Dao grandmasters who had transcended life and death couldn't comprehend this realm. Sword Ancestor Huang had comprehended it at the peak of life and death realm. He was worthy of being called a Sword Dao genius. However, even a Sword Dao genius who dared to oppose Chu Fengmian would only end up being killed by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian suddenly shouted coldly. Facing Sword Ancestor Huang's sword, his body also moved. The sword tip was unsheathed, and the sword chi was like a long dragon. As it roared, it slashed at Sword Ancestor Huang. Roar! 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 The sky was filled with dragon roars. The dragons were furious and looked down on everything. Chapter 766. Sword Chi Dragon? Sword Ancestor Huang said coldly when he saw Chu Fengmian's attack. You look good, but you can't even withstand a single blow. Sword Dao isn't a showy move like yours. You can't even withstand a single blow from me. Die! Sword Ancestor Huang suddenly attacked. His sword blade instantly became 10 times sharper as it slashed towards Chu Fengmian. It seemed like he was going to slay the dragon. Showy move? Chu Fengmian suddenly laughed. Sword Ancestor Huang really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He dared to call Chu Fengmian a showy move in front of him. This wasn't arrogance, but ignorance. The Tianjian sect has declined to this day. 10,000 years ago, the Tianjian sect's Sword Dao was insignificant, but they still had some self-awareness. I didn't expect that 10,000 years later, they don't even have self-awareness. Chu Fengmian sneered as he suddenly attacked. The Sword Chi Dragon suddenly roared. Following the dragon's roar, the sky was filled with sword lights. Bang! The sword and the dragon collided. The sword light couldn't withstand a single blow from the ancient war dragon and was immediately shattered. The backlash made Sword Ancestor Huang take a few steps back. His face was filled with shock and disbelief. In this confrontation of Sword Dao, he was the one who was pushed back by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian, on the other hand, was still standing in the same place. He didn't even look injured. Someone had actually surpassed him in the Sword Dao. Sword Ancestor Huang's mind was suddenly struck by lightning. He, Sword Ancestor Huang, was invincible in Sword Dao and Heavenly Feather Divine Domain. Even some of the Tianjian sect's elders, some old antiques who had transcended life and death, were inferior to Sword Ancestor Huang in Sword Dao. Sword Ancestor Huang had never thought that he would lose in Sword Dao, let alone to a martial artist who was at a lower realm than him. Chu Fengmian was only at the 4th level of life and death realm, but he had defeated him in Sword Dao. The other disciples of the Sky Sword sect were also dumbfounded when they saw this scene. This result was absolutely unimaginable to any of them. Sword Ancestor Desolate's sword Dao was invincible among the younger generation of the 9 regions. No one had been able to compete with him for decades. But now, he was defeated by Chu Fengmian. How is this possible? So what if your sword Dao is strong? How could a mere 4th level life and death realm warrior contend against me? If you were at the same level as me, I would definitely lose this battle. However, you are only at the 4th level of life and death realm. In front of countless Tianjian sect disciples, you will still die today. Sword Ancestor Desolate looked at Chu Fengmian and roared. Kill! Upon hearing Sword Ancestor Huang's command, all the disciples of the Tianjian sect drew their swords one after another. The sky was filled with sword light, which directly condensed into a long river. What formed this river was not water, but countless streams of sword qi. The sword qi was like a river, rushing towards Chu Fengmian. The most dazzling thing in the Sword Dao River was Sword Ancestor Desolate's sword light. His sword light was like a moon surrounded by stars. He wanted to slay Chu Fengmian with a single slash. Since he couldn't fight Chu Fengmian alone, Sword Ancestor Desolate made all the disciples of the Tianjian sect join hands and attack together. Dozens of peak life and death realm sword cultivators attacked at the same time. The sword Qi River was simply unstoppable. Nobody could resist its sharpness. Now, it directly rushed towards Chu Fengmian. Oh? Competing in strength? Seeing the sword Qi River approaching, Chu Fengmian's face was still as calm as before. The corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. Do you think that a group of ants like you can compete with me in terms of strength? If Chu Fengmian hadn't passed his life and death tribulation, he naturally wouldn't dare to face this sword Qi River head-on, and could only retreat. But now, Chu Fengmian had passed his life and death tribulation, and his strength had skyrocketed. No matter how many life and death realm warriors there were, they were all ants in front of him. Even if they joined hands, it would still be the same. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian pulled out his sword again. The shadow of a battle dragon condensed behind his back. Blood qi gushed out and filled the sky, dyeing the sword's edge red. Ancient God of Slaughter supported his body. Apart from these two forces, what was even more eye-catching was a soaring sword intent. Chu Fengmian's 9-region sword art had almost reached the major completion after passing his life and death tribulation. Today was the day he truly displayed his sword art. The sword intent that emerged from Chu Fengmian's body was a lot more terrifying than the joint attack of countless Tianjian sect disciples. Hiss! Countless sword lights emerged from Chu Fengmian's body and condensed on the sword's edge. A sword intent shrouded the sword Qi River. Die! The spiritual sword in Chu Fengmian's hand moved and directly slashed at the sword Qi River. Suddenly, as if the world was collapsing, the sword Qi River was suddenly torn apart. Under this sword, the sword Qi River was split into two, and countless sword Qi disintegrated. The sword Qi River condensed by countless Tianjian sect disciples and Sword Ancestor Desolate was completely destroyed by Chu Fengmian's sword. How is this possible? What kind of technique is this? After the sword Qi River was destroyed, Sword Ancestor Desolate and the others retreated and spat out blood. The sword Qi River under their joint attack couldn't do anything to Chu Fengmian. It was broken by Chu Fengmian's sword. Evildoer! Evildoer! No wonder the little demon lord contacted the other sects to kill this person. This person is almost invincible in the heavenly feather divine domain. If we don't kill him, we will all die. Sword Ancestor Desolate's face was full of regret. If he had known, he would have told the other 7 sects disciples in advance to besiege Chu Fengmian. But it was too late to regret now. Today, Chu Fengmian would never let them go. Sword shatters heaven and earth. Chu Fengmian's sword broke the sword Qi River. Without any pause, he slashed out again. This time, countless sword edges fell from the sky and slashed down. The Tianjian sect's disciples were stopped by the sword edges that filled the sky. Their bodies were hit by the sword Qi. In the next moment, they exploded with a bang and turned into a cloud of blood mist. Their essence blood was absorbed by Chu Fengmian along with the sword Qi. The Tianjian sect's disciples are nothing more than this. Chu Fengmian moved and returned to the carriage. He sat on the carriage and looked down at the crowd. More than half of the Tianjian sect's disciples were dead or injured. Only 5 people were left. Apart from Sword Ancestor Desolate, the other 4 were also the strongest disciples of the Tianjian sect. Only they managed to resist the sword edges that filled the sky. However, each of them was seriously injured and their spiritual power was depleted. However, Chu Fengmian suddenly stopped. His eyes suddenly looked towards the distant ice valley. There's no need to hide. Come out, all of you. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian shouted coldly. His voice was like a dragon's roar, resounding throughout the ice valley. Chapter 767. What's wrong, kid? Why can't you kill all the disciples of the 7 major sects? Now that I'm right in front of you, let's see how you're going to kill me. Suddenly, a mysterious voice rang out. The voice seemed to come from every corner of the valley. It was so loud that no one could tell where the voice came from. You're just a coward who's hiding. Since you won't come out, I'll catch you. Chu Fengmian was not angry when he heard the mysterious voice. He sneered and waved his hand. It turned into a war dragon claw and clawed at the ice valley. A golden figure suddenly appeared in the ice valley under the war dragon claw. This was a man in golden clothes. His face revealed some surprise when he was caught by the claw, but he quickly calmed down and revealed a faint sneer. Looks like you're quite capable since you dared to kill the people of the Sage King sect. Every movement of the golden figure contained the supreme truth of martial arts. Every movement was an extremely pure display of martial arts, just like a martial god. His figure was surrounded by the illusory image of a martial god. Another expert has arrived. Chu Fengmian could tell that the golden figure was as strong as Sword Ancestor Huang when he saw him. In particular, his martial arts were the strongest among the younger generation that Chu Fengmian had ever seen. Battle God Lu of the Sage King sect. Seeing this figure, a trace of killing intent flashed in Han Yueli's eyes as she said coldly. I was hunted down by the people of the Sage King sect when I first came to the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain. How dare you come to the Ice Valley today? Oh? Battle God Lu hunted you down before? Don't be angry. I'll kill every one of these ants that comes today. Whoever dares to come will die. Chu Fengmian, who was sitting in the BMW, slowly said when he heard Han Yueli's words. Although those words were said to Han Yueli, everyone present heard it clearly. The killing intent within those words was not fake at all. Humph, a mayfly trying to shake a tree. You're overestimating yourself. Kid, you're confident. However, you're too arrogant. War God Deer said coldly. He suddenly looked at Sword Ancestor Desolate. Sword Ancestor Huang, I didn't expect that the Tianjian sect would be forced to such a state by a junior. You're not worthy of being on the same level as me. However, since we're both disciples of the 7 major sects, I'll save you today. I'll give you a chance to come back and fight with this kid again. As War God Lu spoke, he suddenly grabbed Sword Ancestor Desolate, intending to take it away. Battle God? Who do you think you? Battle God? You dare to take someone away in front of me? If you want to come to this Sword Ancestor Desolate, then you can die with him, so that you can accompany him on the road to the Yellow Springs. With that, Chu Fengmian suddenly attacked. With a wave of his hand, a palm slammed towards War God Deer. Today, Chu Fengmian's heart was already filled with extreme anger. He wanted to unleash a massacre. Whoever dared to come and save them, Chu Fengmian would kill them. Moreover, this War God Deer had once chased after Han Yueli. It was reasonable for the divine battle God Lu to die today. A brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth dares to attack me? Battle God Lu's eyes were filled with killing intent. He was surprised that Chu Fengmian dared to attack him. In the Heavenly Feather Divine Territory, everyone knew the name of War God Deer. Countless warriors would retreat when they saw him, and no one dared to attack him directly. However, no matter how famous this War God Deer was, he was just a dead man in front of Chu Fengmian. As long as he was an enemy of Chu Fengmian, no matter how strong he was or how deep his background was, he was still a dead man. Battle God Lu was no exception. He had killed more than 20 disciples of the Tianjin sect. Chu Fengmian had gathered all of their blood essence. He had gathered another 3,000 drops of ancient battle dragon blood essence. He had already gathered 36,000 drops of ancient battle dragon blood essence. He could advance further at any time. Battle God Lu was just here to give Chu Fengmian his blood essence. He would be killed and devoured by Chu Fengmian. Battle Dragon's Fury. Chu Fengmian slammed his palm down. It turned into a sky full of battle dragons. They rushed up and attacked Battle God Lu. Dragon Clan's martial technique? Looks like the rumors about you obtaining Dragon Emperor Yan Gu's cave mansion are true. Dragon Emperor Yan Gu was indeed a figure who once stood at the peak of the 9 zones. Even a nameless brat can soar to the sky with his inheritance. It's a pity that you met me today. It's your greatest misfortune. I'll kill you today to avenge the disciples of the Sage King sect. Battle God Lu sneered when he saw Chu Fengmian attack. He gathered his spiritual power and punched out. As he threw a punch forward, the martial gods enveloping him also gathered their strength and threw a punch forward. It looked like an ordinary punch, but it contained the essence of martial arts. The punch blasted toward Chu Fengmian as if it was going to penetrate him. The dragons in the sky were all turned into ashes by the punch. You're just SOSO. Battle God Lu snorted and gathered his spiritual power again. He punched Chu Fengmian again. If that's the case, you'll die. The power of this punch was stronger than the previous one. The power of the 2 punches merged into one and blasted toward Chu Fengmian. Boom! The power of the punch blasted toward Chu Fengmian. However, when it was 3 feet away from Chu Fengmian, the Battle God Lu stopped. The umbrella on the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot opened and 7-colored light shrouded it. The power of the punch was completely blocked by the 7-colored light. It could not shake the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot at all. It can withstand my punch. What kind of spiritual weapon is this? Treasure Chariot? Heavenly Demon Treasure Chariot? Battle God Lu looked at the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot that Chu Fengmian was sitting on. He was shocked. Even a heavenly spiritual artifact would not be able to withstand his full strength. However, his strength was unable to move the Battle Dragon Treasure Carriage at all. Sword Ancestor Huang, no wonder you lost so miserably. This kid actually has such a supreme treasure in his hands? Battle God Lu said in surprise. He seemed to understand why Sword Ancestor Huang lost so miserably. It's not just the Heavenly Demon Treasure Chariot. He also has the supreme treasure of the Dragon Clan, the Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword. Sword Ancestor Huang reminded Battle God Lu when he heard it. The Heavenly Demon Treasure Chariot and the Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword are both supreme treasures of the heavenly spiritual weapons. How can this kid have them all to himself? Battle God Lu's eyes were filled with greed when he heard the 2 names. Chapter 768. The Heavenly Demon Treasured Carriage and the Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword were supreme treasures that could be considered as sect-guarding treasures even in the 7 great sections. Only the sect masters and sect masters could wield it. Chu Fengmian was only a 4th-level life and death martial artist, yet he was able to obtain these 2 supreme treasures. This kind of luck made War God Lu mad with jealousy. Right now, he couldn't wait to attack and seize these 2 treasures. This kid's fortuitous encounters are indeed frightening. His strength at the 4th level of life and death realm is not inferior to yours or mine. You can't find someone like him in the entire 9 regions. Sword Ancestor Desolate said in a deep voice. After being defeated by Chu Fengmian, he was now fully aware of Chu Fengmian's strength. Not only did Chu Fengmian have countless supreme treasures, but his own cultivation had also exceeded the 4th level of life and death realm. Even he couldn't understand how Chu Fengmian, who was only at the 4th level of life and death realm, could possess such strength. Yes, this person has indeed had many fortuitous encounters. But in the end, he's just a kid with good luck. Kill him, and all his fortuitous encounters will belong to us. War God Lu sized up Chu Fengmian with a deep gaze. In his opinion, Chu Fengmian was no different from a treasure trove containing countless fortuitous encounters. As long as he could kill Chu Fengmian today, the ancestral dragon supreme sword and heavenly demon treasured carriage would all belong to him. Saint Monarch sect disciples, heed my command. Kill this person. Walala. All of a sudden, countless figures emerged from the surrounding ice valleys. There were 20 of them in total, and all of them were Saint Monarch sect disciples. Each of them possessed a supreme martial Tao. Sword Ancestor Desolate, let's join hands and kill this person today. His ancestral dragon supreme sword will belong to you. As for the heavenly demon treasured carriage and other treasures, they will all belong to me. How about it? War God Lu handed over a pill to Sword Ancestor Desolate. Swallowing the pill, Sword Ancestor Desolate's injuries instantly healed. Alright, let's join hands and kill this person. Sword Ancestor Desolate coldly shouted, and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. He looked at Chu Fengmian and said arrogantly, Chu Fengmian, even if you have heaven-defying abilities, you will still die today. The moment he spoke, sword intent burst out from Sword Ancestor Desolate's body. Waves of spiritual energy revolved around his sword as he launched a fierce attack at Chu Fengmian. The war god deer also attacked at the same time as Sword Ancestor Desolate. He suddenly threw out a punch. Boundless martial intent enveloped Chu Fengmian as he threw out a punch. Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Deer were both well-known figures in Skyfeather Divine region. Now that the two of them had joined forces, their attacks were extremely ferocious. Boy, I, War Immortal Deer, have never joined forces with others to attack. Even if you die today, it will be an honor. War God Lu suddenly said to Chu Fengmian. Their attacks were already heading towards Chu Fengmian. Facing the joint attack of Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Deer, almost any martial artist would be flustered. The two of them represented the strongest power in the life and death realm. Now that they were working together, their power surpassed the life and death realm and approached the life-shatterer realm. Any martial artist would tremble in fear if they encountered them. However, Chu Fengmian, who was sitting on the chariot, was not afraid at all. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. His mind moved, and the power of the battle dragon condensed on the battle dragon chariot. Instantly, the battle dragon treasured carriage that he was sitting on suddenly roared and directly collided with the power of the two people. On the battle dragon chariot, dragon roars resounded through the heavens and earth. Dragons gathered together, and Chu Fengmian transformed into the Supreme Dragon Emperor, ruling over Jianwang. It was as if he was the Dragon Emperor of ancient times. Rumble. Two incomparably powerful forces collided in the air. Three figures suddenly retreated from the center of the collision. Chu Fengmian, Sword Ancestor Desolate, and War God Deer were all forced to retreat. The power of the collision seemed to be unbearable for any of them. What? He can't even be killed? Whether it was the Sage Monarch sect disciples or the Tianjian sect disciples, when they saw Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Deer working together to attack Chu Fengmian, they already thought that Chu Fengmian was a dead man. No matter how many fortuitous encounters Chu Fengmian had, being able to contend against one of them was already enough for him to be considered an elite among the life and death realm martial artists. Now that the two of them had joined forces, they thought that Chu Fengmian would die without a doubt. But now, Chu Fengmian was only forced to retreat. How could they not be surprised? However, some martial artists could naturally see that Chu Fengmian was forced to retreat. Naturally, his spiritual power must have been greatly damaged. In the returning ruined sky, any martial artist who used martial skills would need to consume dozens of times more spiritual power. Chu Fengmian had already fought fiercely with the Tianjian sect disciples before. This time, he was forced to retreat, and his power was at its weakest. Good chance. Kid, give me your life. Seeing that Chu Fengmian was being pushed back, one of the Sage Monarch sect disciples suddenly rushed out and punched Chu Fengmian. This Sage Monarch sect disciple was Pan Chun, who had previously fought with Chu Fengmian outside the returning ruined sky. Chu Fengmian, we almost killed you outside. You were lucky enough to survive the opening of the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain, but today, you will die at my hands. Martial truth. Blood essence ignition. Pan Chun's eyes were filled with murderous intent. Waves of golden flames were burning on his body, causing his strength to soar. The fist wind was 5 or 6 meters wide. It descended from the sky and enveloped Chu Fengmian. Pan Chun? You were lucky enough to survive my attack, and now you dare to attack me? Chu Fengmian glanced at Pan Chun and snorted coldly. The chariot that he was sitting on suddenly moved. The 8 primordial battle dragons roared and pulled the chariot towards Pan Chun. The fist wind was shattered by the chariot. Then, Pan Chun's body was mercilessly crushed under the wheels of the war dragon chariot. His body was crushed, and only his blood essence was left, covering the wheels of the chariot. Sword of Heaven and Earth. Sage Monarch Invincible. Just as Pan Chun was killed by Chu Fengmian, Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Deer had already mobilized their spiritual power. They suddenly counterattacked, and their faces were ferocious. Kid, even if you have the protection of the carriage, both you and the carriage will die today. In the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain, no one can resist the two of us together. Sword Ancestor Desolate roared, and a sword that could split the sky and earth suddenly fell. Pan Chun's attack gave the two of them a chance to gather their spiritual power. Now, they were gathering their spiritual power to use a supreme killing move. Chapter 769. The heaven-shaking sword also contained the pure martial Tao. The war god Lu's fist was also contained within it. Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Lu had put aside their previous enmity and joined hands to kill Chu Fengmian. The sword slashed towards Chu Fengmian. No matter where Chu Fengmian escaped to, he would not be able to escape from the sword light. It was an unavoidable sword. Humph! Facing the sword, Chu Fengmian suddenly snorted. He held the Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword in his hand and suddenly unleashed a sword attack. 2 sword lights suddenly clashed in the sky. The sword light that was condensed by Sword Ancestor Desolate started to shatter layer by layer. It gradually broke apart and was about to be devoured. However, Sword Ancestor Desolate's face suddenly revealed a cold smile when he saw this scene. Kid, I knew that you would not be able to resist using your sword intent. I will accept your sword intent. Sword Ancestor Desolate laughed out loud. His shattered sword light suddenly shattered, splitting into countless sword chi. Each of these sword chi contained an extremely ancient aura. Chu Fengmian's sword light seemed to have met its nemesis. It was gradually devoured by the sword chi and lost its sharpness. Chu Fengmian's face revealed a bit of astonishment when he saw the sword light being devoured. He blurted out, Supreme Sword Chi? There were a total of 31 Supreme Sword Chi in Sword Ancestor Desolate's sword edge. It had been hidden in the sword edge all along. At this moment, it was suddenly revealed. Even Chu Fengmian did not feel the existence of Supreme Sword Chi in Sword Ancestor Desolate's body. Not bad. Looks like you have some knowledge. You can actually recognize this Supreme Sword Chi. Sword Ancestor Desolate laughed coldly. It was filled with killing intent. Kid, I did not plan to use this Supreme Sword Chi to deal with you. This is my trump card. Today, I can only reveal it in order to kill you. You didn't expect it, did you? I have Supreme Sword Chi in my hand. This Supreme Sword Chi is the nemesis of Sword Tao. You can't use your sword skills anymore. Otherwise, your sword will be devoured by this Supreme Sword Chi. Sword Ancestor Desolate laughed arrogantly. Now, you better be prepared to surrender. How are you going to fight us without using your sword technique? Supreme Sword Chi. The moment they saw the Supreme Sword Chi on Sword Ancestor Desolate, the disciples of the Tianjian sect were incomparably shocked. They did not know that Sword Ancestor Desolate had such a fortuitous encounter. Supreme Sword Chi was a supreme treasure of the Sword Tao. Everyone wanted to obtain it. Sword Ancestor Desolate had mastered 31 of them and was almost invincible. No sword cultivator could not compete with him. Sword Ancestor Desolate. To Sword Ancestor Desolate Sword. War God Deer stood to the side. When he saw the supreme sword chi on Sword Ancestor Baron's body, his eyes were filled with dread. Sword Ancestor Desolate Sword. Contained. 222. It. Chu Fengmian, all of your sword techniques will be completely ineffective in front of this supreme sword chi. Now that you're my enemy, it's like throwing an egg at a rock. Quickly surrender and I'll leave you a complete corpse. Supreme sword chi. Not bad. Sword Ancestor Desolate. Looks like you didn't stay in Heavenly Feather Divine Domain for so many years in vain. Chu Fengmian looked at Sword Ancestor Desolate with a smile. He was indeed smiling. His motive for coming to End Ruined Sky was to collect Supreme Sword Chi. Since Sword Ancestor Desolate had 31 Supreme Sword Chi, it was a good opportunity for him to collect them. Now, Chu Fengmian had a total of 50 Supreme Sword Chi. Together with the 31 Supreme Sword Chi, he had a total of 81 Supreme Sword Chi. When the time came, the power would be many times stronger than now. How could Chu Fengmian not smile at such good luck? You're about to die and you still dare to smile? Sword Ancestor Desolate saw Chu Fengmian smile and his face turned gloomy. Die! Sword Ancestor Desolate attacked again. 31 rays of Supreme Sword Chi fused into his sword, and the sharp sword slashed towards Chu Fengmian's chest. He wanted to pierce Chu Fengmian's heart with his sword. Sword Ancestor Desolate, do you think you're the only one who has Supreme Sword Chi? Supreme Sword Chi, come out. Chu Fengmian shouted coldly in the face of the incoming sword attack. In an instant, countless Supreme Sword Chi appeared beside Chu Fengmian. Each of the Supreme Sword Chi was filled with killing intent. It was incomparably sharp and contained Supreme Tao of Slaughter. Break! Chu Fengmian moved the ancestral dragon Supreme Sword in his hand. The 50 Supreme Sword Chi integrated into the sword and met the incoming sword attack. Kacha! Sword Ancestor Desolate's sword was directly crushed. The 31 Supreme Sword Chis within it were all separated and sent flying. How is this possible? How do you have Supreme Sword Chi? Sword Ancestor Desolate's eyes almost fell out of their sockets when he saw Chu Fengmian attack. The Supreme Sword Chi was a fortuitous encounter that he obtained after experiencing countless dangers in the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain. To be able to obtain the 31 Supreme Sword Chi was his greatest fortuitous encounter in decades. It had always been Sword Ancestor Desolate's greatest trump card and he had never used it. Now, he had no choice but to use it to kill Chu Fengmian. He wanted to kill Chu Fengmian with a single blow. However, Chu Fengmian also had Supreme Sword Chi. Moreover, the amount was much more than his. There were 50 Supreme Sword Chi. The two sword lights clashed and the outcome was decided in an instant. Sword Ancestor Desolate's Supreme Sword Chi was scattered and out of his control. Not good. Sword Ancestor Desolate, quickly retrieve all the Supreme Sword Chi. I'll deal with this person. You can't let the Supreme Sword Chi fall into his hands. War God Deer shouted when he saw the Supreme Sword Chi flying out. He moved his body and punched Chu Fengmian again. Every additional strand of this Supreme Sword aura was enough to multiply one's strength. Chu Fengmian's strength was already extremely terrifying. If Chu Fengmian was allowed to obtain the 31 Supreme Sword Chi, their chances of killing Chu Fengmian would be slim. War God Deer attacked to delay Chu Fengmian and give Sword Ancestor Desolate a chance to retrieve the Supreme Sword Chi again. Humph, you want to stop me? Sword formation, come out. Chu Fengmian snorted when he saw War God Deer rushing over. 100,000 spiritual swords came out from his body and formed a Supreme Sword formation, trapping War God Deer within. At the same time, Chu Fengmian moved and drove the carriage to chase after the Supreme Sword Chi. Chapter 770. 100,000 spiritual swords shot out, the black mysterious sword formation suddenly appeared, turning into a sword formation, trapping the war god deer. He didn't have time to waste on the war god deer. As long as Chu Fengmian could obtain all the other Supreme Sword Chi and condense all 81 Supreme Sword Chi, the war god deer would be no different from an ant in front of Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian drove the war dragon treasure carriage and chased after the war god deer. The war dragon treasure carriage was much faster than the sword ancestor desolate. "Not good, stop him!" shouted Battle Godlu when he saw what Chu Fengmian was doing. The disciples of the Sage Monarch sect suddenly attacked together. They unleashed their pure martial arts and a few silhouettes soared into the sky, trying to stop Chu Fengmian. "You want to stop my treasure carriage with just the likes of you? War Dragon treasure carriage, crush them!" Chu Fengmian let out a cold snort. His hands continuously shot out spiritual energy and poured it into the War Dragon chariot. The power of the War Dragon treasure carriage increased exponentially as the spiritual energy was poured into it. Boom! The 8 primordial battle dragons that were pulling the chariot suddenly swelled up under the infusion of the spiritual power. Their bodies became extremely huge and contained absolute power. The speed of the War Dragon treasure carriage increased exponentially and rushed forward. The disciples of the Sage Monarch sect were all crushed under the impact of the War Dragon treasure carriage. Even the Sage Monarch golden body of the Sage Monarch sect disciples could not compete with the power of the War Dragon treasure carriage. They were all crushed and turned into a cloud of blood mist, dying under the wheels of the carriage. Sword Dao Solipsism. Come back. Seeing this, the Sword Ancestor Desolate's face became ferocious. He activated his spiritual energy and tried to collect the Supreme Sword Chi. The Supreme Sword Chi was the treasure of all sword cultivators in the world. It could restrain all sword cultivators in the world. The Sword Ancestor Desolate used the Supreme Sword Chi to overcome Chu Fengmian's Sword Dao. However, no one expected Chu Fengmian to have so many Supreme Sword Chi. A total of 50 Supreme Sword Chi. If the 31 Supreme Sword Chi were in the hands of the Sword Ancestor Desolate, although he could not fight Chu Fengmian head-on, he could still fight Chu Fengmian. However, if Chu Fengmian obtained all of the 31 Supreme Sword Chis, he would have no chance of contending with Chu Fengmian again. He could not let Chu Fengmian get the 31 Supreme Sword Chi. Feed the sword with blood. The Sword Ancestor Desolate's Sword Ancestor Desolate's Sword Dao. Suddenly, he slashed Sword Ancestor Desolate's arm, and cut Sword Ancestor Desolate's arm Sword Chi. Blood essence seeped out and burned it. Sword Ancestor Desolate could also tell that Chu Fengmian was the most difficult opponent he had encountered since coming to the Heavenly Feather Divine region. He had to win this battle. Otherwise, he would only end up being killed by Chu Fengmian. Sword Ancestor Desolate did not hesitate to burn his blood essence, causing the sword intent on his body to condense to the extreme, and suddenly grabbed at the Supreme Sword Chi. Sword Ancestor Desolate, do you think you can take the Supreme Sword Chi in front of me? Chu Fengmian looked at the Sword Ancestor Desolate's action and suddenly shouted. His figure moved and descended from the War Dragon treasure chariot. Compared to the Sword Ancestor Desolate, Chu Fengmian was the first to rush into the Supreme Sword Chi. The War Dragon's dragon prestige burst out from his body. These 31 Supreme Sword auras had already lost over half of their strength in the previous exchange. Now that they were suppressed by the dragon might of the battle dragon, they were immediately unable to resist. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and collected all of them. The 31 Supreme Sword Chi lost their resistance and were absorbed into Chu Fengmian's body with a long roar. Together with the 50 Supreme Sword Chi in Chu Fengmian's body, they merged into one. A total of 81 Supreme Sword Chi formed the 9-9 Great Formation. At this moment, Chu Fengmian's sword intent suddenly became many times stronger than before. At the same time, Chu Fengmian could see the origin of the ancient sword arts recorded in the 31 Supreme Sword Chi. The essence was integrated into the 9-domain sword art. Chu Fengmian's 9-domain sword art had reached greater success at this moment. Bang! Chu Fengmian's spiritual energy fluctuations suddenly burst out. Chu Fengmian's cultivation realm broke through again at this moment, reaching the 5th level of life and death realm. Chu Fengmian's 9-domain sword art had also merged with his power. After obtaining the 31 supreme sword qi, Chu Fengmian's cultivation realm suddenly soared. Good, a total of 81 supreme sword qi. This will be very useful to me. Chu Fengmian laughed. The sword ancestor Desolate was his lucky star. He had delivered the 31 supreme sword qi to him. Now that Chu Fengmian had 81 supreme sword qi, he wanted to see who could be his opponent in the heavenly feather divine domain. You can all die now. Mysterious black sword formation, kill. Chu Fengmian's mind moved, and the power of the mysterious black sword formation went berserk. When it surrounded the war god deer just now, the mysterious black sword formation had trapped him and stalled for time. But this time, following Chu Fengmian's order, the 100,000 spiritual swords on the mysterious black sword formation suddenly surged with blood qi and slashed at all the warriors present. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's body suddenly moved and slashed at the sword ancestor Desolate. The moment the sword ancestor Desolate saw Chu Fengmian collect the 31 supreme sword qi, his face was already pale. However, the murderous intent in his eyes didn't diminish, but became even more intense. He wasn't willing to accept that all his opportunities had become Chu Fengmian's wedding dress. Now, he only wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. The 81 supreme sword qi on Chu Fengmian's body would all belong to him. At that time, he would be the undisputed #1 person in the heavenly feather divine domain. I, the sword ancestor Desolate, will never lose. Kid, so what if you have the upper hand now? All of this is just a test for me. In the end, I will still kill you and seize all your opportunities. The sword ancestor Desolate looked at Chu Fengmian and roared. Countless amounts of blood essence burned, turning into a blood-red flame that adhered to the blade. The sword ancestor Desolate was burning his blood essence now. He wanted to fight to the death with Chu Fengmian and win a slim chance of survival. Great fire sky burning sword. The blade flashed like a scorching sun attacking Chu Fengmian. The surrounding ice melted under the scorching sun. It was extremely terrifying. Chapter 771. Rumble. The great flame sky-burning sword, which contained endless blood-red flames, fell from the sky. The sword became incomparably crazy just like sword ancestor Desolate. The flames contained in the sword blade were going to burn everything in the world. However, Chu Fengmian looked at the sword calmly and sneered. He suddenly raised his right hand and grabbed towards the sky. The flames on the sword blade were extinguished on the spot. The flames that were burning fiercely a moment ago were extinguished by Chu Fengmian. With a grab from Chu Fengmian, all of them were extinguished. All of the sword will on them were devoured by the supreme sword qi around Chu Fengmian. With a wave of his hand, Chu Fengmian resolved sword ancestor Desolate's desperate sword attack. His strength was countless times more frightening than the strength he displayed earlier. Die! Chu Fengmian looked at sword ancestor Desolate and shouted coldly. His sword blade changed its target and slashed towards sword ancestor Desolate. A sword light flashed and sword ancestor Desolate's body was instantly destroyed by the sword light. His blood essence and all of his spiritual weapons fell into Chu Fengmian's hands. Sage Monarch Heavenly Tao. Immortal King Fist. Sage Monarch Invincible. Martial Tao is Supreme. Almost at the same time, the Sage Monarch sect's disciples activated countless killing moves and bombarded Chu Fengmian. These killing moves were the trump cards of the Sage Monarch sect's disciples. Now, none of them held back and used all of their trump cards to kill Chu Fengmian. The surrounding space was trembling. No one could survive in the center of this power. Boom! 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 Suddenly, a sword light burst out from the center of the explosion. This sword light destroyed all of the explosions. Chu Fengmian's body jumped out from the center of the explosion. There was not a single wound on his body. He was unharmed. How is this possible? The disciples of the sage monarch sect were all dumbfounded. Even with so many of them working together, Chu Fengmian was still unharmed. In the face of such an attack, not even a life-saving demolisher would dare to say that they could escape unscathed. However, Chu Fengmian had managed to accomplish it. All of your struggles are futile. All of you can die now. People from the 7 great sects don't deserve to live in this world. All of you can die now. Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with murderous intent. With a wave of his hand, it transformed into a battle dragon claw and swept out. Bang! 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 The disciples of the Sage King sect were instantly killed by the battle dragon claw. They were turned into blood mists and their blood essence was devoured by Chu Fengmian. Good! Good, after devouring the blood essence of these martial artists present, my realm will most likely advance a step further. Chu Fengmian devoured the blood essence and was overjoyed. His battle dragon art did not have any bottlenecks. As long as he had enough spiritual energy, he would be able to make a breakthrough. These disciples of the Sage King sect were all geniuses at the peak of the life and death realm. They were rare figures in the 9 domains. Now that they were all gathered in the Heavenly Feather domain, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Chu Fengmian. This was definitely a great opportunity for him. You're courting death. With a furious roar, a golden figure suddenly rushed towards Chu Fengmian. With a punch, it blasted towards Chu Fengmian. Seeing Chu Fengmian slaughtering the disciples of the Sage King sect, War God Deer was furious. He gathered all his spiritual energy and turned it into a punch, aiming to kill Chu Fengmian. The War God Deer had never been forced into such a predicament before. Seeing the disciples of the Sage Monarch sect die at the hands of Chu Fengmian, the War God Deer's power soared in anger. War God Deer was known as the War God because he became more courageous the more he fought. In the face of danger, he could make a breakthrough and turn the situation around. If a peerless genius like him could not be killed in a single blow, the greater the danger, the greater the motivation. It would stimulate their foundation and make them more difficult to deal with. You still want to struggle? Even if you break through to the life and death realm now, so what? Your death is already destined. There is no other outcome. Chu Fengmian's voice sounded like the judgment of the King of Hell. As he spoke, the 81 Supreme Sword Chi condensed and turned into a sword array. This was another form of the unparalleled Sword Chi, the sword formation. Aside from being incomparably sharp due to the fusion of the sword edge, the sword formation had another form. If one could obtain enough Supreme Sword Chi, they could condense into a sword array. Of all the sword formations in the world, the most perfect one was the one constructed with Supreme Sword Chi. The value of the 81 Supreme Sword Chi was no less than 81 heaven-grade spiritual weapons. 81 heaven-grade spiritual weapons formed a sword array. Its power was simply unimaginable. And the sword array formed by the 81 Supreme Sword Chi was even more frightening than the sword array formed by 81 heaven-grade spiritual weapons. Legend had it that there were 2 types of Supreme Sword Chi in the past. The first type was 3,000 Supreme Sword Chi, and 3,000 Supreme Sword Chi would condense into a spiritual sword. This spiritual sword was undoubtedly the #1 sword in the world. No one could compete with it. The second form was 3,000 Supreme Sword Chi condensed into a sword array. It was the #1 sword array in the world. Although Chu Fengmian did not obtain all of the 3,000 Supreme Sword Chi, the 81 Supreme Sword Chi was enough to condense a sword array. Boom! The sword array condensed, and a murderous aura filled the surrounding space. There was only one possibility for anyone in any existence to fall into the sword array. Death. No! War God Deer fell into the sword array and roared madly. His fist wind was completely shattered by the sword array. Countless cracks appeared on his Sage King golden body and it was completely shattered. No matter how tough his body was, it was like a piece of paper in front of this Supreme Sword Chi. Under the attack of the countless Sword Chi, War God Deer was already covered in blood. He was battered and exhausted, and he was on the verge of collapse. However, Chu Fengmian did not relax. A martial artist like War God Deer was an absolute genius in the 7 major sections. In the 9 regions, he was a genius among geniuses. If Chu Fengmian did not kill him immediately, as long as he was given a chance, he could turn the tables and kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian would not give him any chance. Die! Chu Fengmian shouted coldly. The 81 Supreme Sword Qi condensed into a 7-colored sword light and slashed towards War God Deer. Chapter 772. The rainbow-colored sword light formed by the 81 Supreme Sword energies fell from the sky. The War God Deer's body couldn't escape. There was no way he could escape. Today, Chu Fengmian would kill everyone in the Ice Rift Valley who wanted to deal with Han Yueli. Chu Fengmian was a man of his word. He wouldn't let anyone leave. Crack! The rainbow-colored sword light fell, and the Saint King True body on the War God Deer's body cracked. It was completely destroyed by the sword. In the eyes of the War God Deer, he could already see death. No! Impossible! How can I, the War God Deer, die? I am the War God. I will never die. I will surpass life and death. I will never die. How can a person who dominates the 9 regions die in this small heavenly feather divine region? The War God Deer was furious. He was hysterical, and his aura gathered again. All the fortuitous encounters he had had were unleashed to the extreme at this moment. He wanted to fight Chu Fengmian and turn the tables. No matter how you struggle, it's meaningless. Die! Chu Fengmian's murderous intent was thick. The ancient god of slaughter condensed behind him. Waves of murderous intent shrouded the rainbow-colored sword light. The rainbow-colored sword light was shrouded in a blood-red hue. Chu Fengmian's murderous intent wouldn't waver. The War God Deer must die. The rainbow-colored sword light's power soared. The aura that the War God Deer had just gathered was completely shattered in an instant. No! The War God Deer roared, but it was useless. The rainbow-colored sword light took the opportunity to fall. The War God Deer's body was completely destroyed. Now, not even a speck of ashes could be found. The only thing left was his essence blood, which had fallen into Chu Fengmian's body along with the sword light. When the War God Deer's essence blood merged with Chu Fengmian's body, he felt a surging power. It was incomparably hot. Although the War God Deer was dead, his realm was much hotter than most martial artists. It symbolized his invincible martial intent. Both Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Deer were rare geniuses in the 9 regions. If they hadn't met Chu Fengmian, the two of them would have easily surpassed life and death in the future. But now, they had provoked Chu Fengmian, which was their stupidest action. No one who made an enemy of Chu Fengmian could leave alive. Wow, there are so many mysterious items in the War God Deer's spatial ring. Chu Fengmian opened the Deer War God's spatial ring and was immediately surrounded by extremely pure spiritual energy. There were countless wondrous items in the Deer War God's spatial ring. There were countless wondrous items that had disappeared from the 9 regions for tens of thousands of years. Even Chu Fengmian had never seen these legendary items in his previous life. Now, they were all lying quietly in the War God Deer's spatial ring. There were over 100 primordial spiritual weapons in the War God Deer's spatial ring. There were even 2 heaven-grade spiritual weapons. As a disciple of the Sage Monarch sect, the War God Deer cultivated his body and didn't use spirit weapons. Therefore, he had managed to preserve all of his spirit weapons. Now, they were all in Chu Fengmian's possession. Mysterious Black Sword Formation. Chu Fengmian shouted and the mysterious black sword formation suddenly appeared. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and threw all of the spirit weapons in the spatial ring into the mysterious black sword formation. Heaven-grade spiritual weapons were of little use to Chu Fengmian, unless they were at the level of the Ancestral Dragon's Supreme Sword or the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot. It was better to use all of them to nurture the mysterious black sword formation. When the mysterious black sword formation was nurtured to its peak, its power wouldn't be any weaker than the Ancestral Dragon's Supreme Sword or the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot. It might even be stronger. Other than the war god Deer's spatial ring, the other disciples of the sage monarch sect didn't have as many treasures in their spatial rings. However, they were all wealthy. They had all stayed in the Sky Feather sacred territory for several decades and had accumulated a lot of wealth. Now, it had all fallen into Chu Fengmian's hands. There were royal-grade spiritual stones and various types of sacred medicine. There were simply too many to count. Chu Fengmian even found a type of spiritual stone that was purer than the royal-grade spiritual stones. It was the sacred-grade spiritual stone. It was a rare existence in the countless ancient cave mansions of the 9 regions. Now, there were hundreds of them in Chu Fengmian's hands. This time, Chu Fengmian had really earned a lot. The wealth he had obtained was countless times more than what he had obtained from the ancient Yan Dragon Emperor cave mansion. Even the wealth in the Blood Sea might not necessarily be more than the wealth in the spatial rings. This wealth was comparable to the Northern Mang Academy. If Chu Fengmian was willing to use this wealth, he could establish a force that wasn't inferior to the Northern Mang Academy and establish his own sect. However, Chu Fengmian didn't plan to do so. No matter how much wealth he had, it was far from enough for him. His battle dragon art was like a bottomless pit. No matter how much spiritual energy he had, it might not be enough to support his devouring. Chu Fengmian's next bottleneck was to surpass life and death. Once he surpassed it, he would be able to step onto the life and death steps, the life-shattering realm. Surpassing life and death was countless times more difficult than passing the great calamity of life and death. For example, War God Deer and Sword Ancestor Desolate had been accumulating for dozens of years in the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain, yet they hadn't succeeded in surpassing life and death. From this, one could see how difficult it was. As for Chu Fengmian, he cultivated the Dragon Slayer art. The difficulty of his breakthrough was 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times more difficult than ordinary martial artists. He had to accumulate early so that he could break through the bottleneck in one go. The more wealth Chu Fengmian had, the better. He needed as much as he could get. These Ice Saint herbs are the most suitable for you. You can refine them all and recover your strength. Chu Fengmian took out all the Ice Saint herbs from the spatial rings and handed them to Hanueli. Hanueli's current realm had already reached the 8th level of life and death realm. She had broken through again and again in the midst of countless dangers. If she hadn't been injured, the Tianjian sect disciples and Sword Ancestor Desolate wouldn't have been able to do anything to her. All right. Hanueli took the Ice Saint elixir and sucked it in. All the Ice Saint elixirs entered her mouth. Saint herbs were called saint herbs because of the enormous amount of spiritual energy they contained. Ordinary martial artists had to refine them carefully. However, Hanueli wasn't afraid. She had the profound cold body. No matter how many Ice Saint herbs there were, she could swallow them all. Her aura gradually rose, and vaguely, it had already surpassed its previous peak. Chapter 773. A bone-piercing chill suddenly spread out from Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian turned his head to look at Hanueli's body. Her skin was covered in a layer of ice crystals. Even Chu Fengmian had to use his spiritual power to resist the chill. After 2 hours, the ice crystals on Hanueli's body were already an inch thick. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound rang out. The ice crystals around Hanueli shattered one after another, and the chill on her body gradually disappeared. However, even though the chilliness was restrained, it was still enough to be felt. The current Hanueli was a lot stronger than before. 9th level of life and death realm. Her cultivation had broken through once again, reaching the 9th level of life and death realm. It seemed like Hanueli's repeated appearances during the pursuit had caused her cultivation to improve. However, due to her injuries, Hanueli couldn't see it. Now that she had swallowed the Ice Saint elixir, the injuries on her body had been swept away. She had broken through and re-established herself, stepping into the 9th level of life and death realm. Although she was only in the 9th level of life and death realm, Chu Fengmian could feel that Hanueli's aura was not inferior to Sword Ancestor Desolate, War God Deer, and the others. In fact, he could vaguely feel that she had surpassed the two of them. My profound cold body has improved, and I've comprehended even more innate origin power. Now that those people still dare to pursue me, I'll kill them all. Hanyu Li's lips curled into a sneer, and her eyes were ice cold. Ever since she came to the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain, she had been pursued by countless people. Now, it was time for her to take revenge. Let's go. There are still many cultivators in this ice rift valley. Each and every one of them wants to kill me. Since they dare to pursue me, they will all die today. Hanyu Li coldly snorted. Her body suddenly moved, and countless snowflakes were swept up in the ice rift valley. Like a snowstorm, she flew out. Chu Fengmian looked at her actions, but didn't say anything. His body moved, and the war dragon treasured carriage followed behind. Many cultivators were traversing through the ice rift valley. There were people traveling alone, and there were also cultivators of some factions traveling in groups. At a glance, there were at least dozens of people. Senior brother, do you think that woman is really hiding in the ice rift valley? Two cultivators were searching for Hanyu Li. As they chatted, one of them looked around and said, "Let's go and find her. There's not a single person in the ice rift valley. Otherwise, why don't we bring her here? She's a woman with innate divine body. She is more valuable than any treasure. A woman. She is. She is. One of the cultivators snorted coldly. The two of them didn't seem to be disciples of the major sections. That was why they had joined forces. However, those who could survive in the sinkhole sky were definitely not weaklings. The strength of these two cultivators wasn't much weaker than the ordinary disciples of the 7 major sections. The two of them continued to search. Suddenly, a white figure appeared in front of them. It was about 100 meters away from them. This is profound cold body? The two of them looked at the white figure. Suddenly, their eyes widened. Then, they exclaimed in joy. The heavens are indeed helping us. This woman has a profound cold body. She must be the person we are looking for. I heard that she is seriously injured. Quick, capture her first. The two of them were overjoyed. Their bodies moved, and they rushed toward the white figure. However, just as the two of them were about to make their move, an endless amount of ice and snow suddenly fell, turning the surroundings into a mass of ice. Hanyu Li suddenly unsheathed her sword. With one slash of her sword, thousands of miles of ice were sealed. When the two cultivators saw this scene, their expressions changed. Without saying a word, they turned around and tried to escape. When they saw Hanyu Li make her move, they immediately understood that Hanyu Li's strength was far above theirs. To be able to survive in the sinkhole skywing, strength wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was one's eyesight. When faced with danger, the first reaction would be to run. However, Hanyu Li wasn't going to give the two of them a chance. With a slash of her sword, the two cultivators were cut into pieces. They were killed immediately. She didn't leave them any chance to escape. Their empty rings were taken away by Hanyu Li. Then, her figure disappeared from the spot. This blood essence can't be wasted. After Hanyu Li left, Chu Fengmian drove the carriage over. When he saw the two corpses on the ground, he used his mind to extract all the blood essence from them. Then, he continued to leave. This scene in the Ice Rift Valley lasted for an entire day. Without exception, 63 cultivators had all died under Hanyu Li's sword. In the entire Ice Rift Valley, apart from Chu Fengmian and Hanyu Li, there was no one else. There was nothing cruel about this. Those who killed would be killed by others. These cultivators all wanted to kill Hanyu Li. Many of them even wanted to kidnap Hanyu Li and enslave her. If Hanyu Li had fallen into their hands, she would have suffered a fate thousands of times worse than death. Now that she was dead, it was a good thing for them. My strength has been fully restored. Killing these people is enough for my swordsmanship to improve. No matter how good a swordsmanship is, it must be tempered by blood before it can reach great success. In the Ice Rift Valley, Hanueli wiped the blood off her sword as she spoke calmly. The anger in her heart had subsided. Her face had also gradually melted and returned to normal. It is said that this is a place called the Heavenly Feather Domain. Ordinary cultivators are unable to leave, but now that we have the Jade Talisman, we can leave whenever we want. Do you want to leave now? Hanueli asked tentatively. She had come to the Heavenly Feather Domain by chance. However, there were not many real treasures in the Heavenly Feather Domain. The real treasure in the Heavenly Feather Domain was the Cloud Feather Palace in the sky. However, the Cloud Feather Palace was high and lofty. It was at least 10,000 meters high. Although Chu Fengmian had the War Dragon carriage and could travel in the air, 100 meters was his limit. It was impossible to climb the Cloud Feather Palace, which was 10,000 meters high. However, it was not in Chu Fengmian's nature to give up. He had come to the Heavenly Feather Domain for the Cloud Feather Palace. He could not let the Cloud Feather Palace go halfway. The Cloud Feather Palace must have a way to enter. Chu Fengmian raised his head and looked at the Cloud Feather Palace. Just as Chu Fengmian looked at the Cloud Feather Palace, a rainbow suddenly appeared in the palace. Chapter 774. This rainbow suddenly extended out from the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace and extended all the way to the bottom of the mountain, where it gradually solidified. The rainbow condensed into a white jade-like appearance. Layers of colorful white jade-like layers formed a flight of stairs. Following this flight of stairs, one could reach the Cloud Feather Palace from the mountain peak. This is? The Cloud Feather Palace is open? Chu Fengmian looked at the changes in the sky and was overjoyed. The existence of the Cloud Feather Palace was not just for show. It was not that there were no opportunities, but the time had not yet come. Now, the opportunity had finally arrived. Chu Fengmian's eyes were burning with passion. Chu Fengmian had to get the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace. The Cloud Feather Palace used to be the most powerful sect in the 9 regions. No one knew how many treasures it had left behind. But as long as one could get a piece of it, it would be a great opportunity. The Cloud Feather Palace is open. Let's go quickly. Hanueli raised his head and shouted when he saw the changes in the Cloud Feather Palace. Okay, let's go. Chu Fengmian did not hesitate. He moved his body and rushed toward the mountain peak. He drove the carriage and rushed toward it. At the same time, Chu Fengmian also sensed that countless experts in the Heavenly Feather Domain, including some hidden experts, had sensed the changes in the Cloud Feather Palace. All of them had awakened and were planning to fight for it. The ultimate goal of countless warriors in the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain was to get the Cloud Feather Palace. Whoever could get the Cloud Feather Palace would have a meteoric rise. The inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace could not be compared to that of the current 7 major sections. Chu Fengmian and Hanueli sat in the War Dragon carriage and flew toward the mountain peak. Along the way, Chu Fengmian saw many warriors rushing toward the mountain peak. It could be said that all the warriors in the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain were rushing over. This mountain peak should be the center of the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain. Chu Fengmian could tell at a glance that this mountain was the center of the entire Heavenly Feather Divine region. It was also the tallest and most majestic mountain. When Chu Fengmian had just arrived at Heavenly Feather Divine territory, he had observed this mountain peak. However, at that time, this mountain peak was still filled with a kind of 7-colored light. It seemed to be an ancient restriction that prevented anyone from entering. Chu Fengmian observed for a moment and understood that the 7-colored light was far beyond his ability to deal with. Therefore, he did not pay attention to the mountain peak. Now, as the rainbow-colored light descended from the sky and turned into a rainbow staircase, the rainbow-colored light around the mountain was shattered. It seemed that the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace had truly been activated. Stop! Get out of my way! Whoever dares to stop me will die. At the foot of the mountain, countless martialists were already engaged in a fierce battle. None of them were willing to let others reach the top of the mountain. It was chaos at the foot of the mountain. Countless warriors were like locusts, fighting in a frenzy. Everyone wanted to be the first to enter the mountain peak. The remaining disciples of the 7 major sects, Medicine King Valley, Ancient Moon Valley, Desolate Ancient Sect, and Dubhe Hall, were all involved in this chaotic battle. Everyone wanted to fight their way out and reach the top. In addition, the disciples of Black Heaven Sect, Blazing Sun Sect, and even Baimang Academy were also involved in this chaotic battle. There were hundreds of people. These people were all warriors who had come to the Heavenly Feather Divine region many years ago. They were all waiting for the right time for the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace to open. Now that the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace had suddenly opened, they were all in a frenzy and wanted to be the first to enter. It's so chaotic. What should we do? Hanueli could not help but ask when he saw the chaos. Given their strength, it would not be easy for them to escape if they were caught in this chaos. Although their lives were not in danger, it would be easy for them to delay time. If they were delayed, there was a chance that the inheritance treasure of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace would be obtained by others. Especially now, Chu Fengmian had already seen a lot of warriors rushing out of the chaos and directly rushing towards the mountain peak. Don't care about them. Let's rush over. Whoever dares to stop us will die. Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He shouted coldly and activated the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot. A dragon roar suddenly sounded. The entire War Dragon Chariot turned into a streak of light as it rushed into the crowd. The surrounding spiritual energy suddenly erupted as it pushed the surrounding warriors away, creating a path for the War Dragon Chariot to rush forward. Damn it! Don't let him pass. Many warriors in the chaotic battle saw Chu Fengmian's intention. Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. If they let anyone pass, their chances of obtaining the inheritance treasure of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace would be reduced. In an instant, dozens of martial techniques bombarded the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot at the same time. 1,000 miles of Ice City. Hanueli's figure suddenly moved from the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot. She stood up and moved the tip of her sword. The ice in front of her turned into a huge ice city. Countless martial techniques bombarded the huge ice city. More than half of the power was blocked, and the remaining spiritual energy hit the 7-colored light of the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot's umbrella. It could not even shake the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot. Facing the countless bombardments, Chu Fengmian's Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot remained motionless. Under Chu Fengmian's control, the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot's speed became much faster. Bang! Under the impact of the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot, the few warriors at the front of the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot exploded and turned into a cloud of blood mist. They were all killed. As for the surrounding warriors, they were all pushed back by the impact. Many of them spat out mouthfuls of blood and suffered serious injuries. Let's go! All the warriors were pushed back, and the path in front of Chu Fengmian was clear again. He used the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot to rush up the mountain. Bang! Chu Fengmian's Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot broke through the crowd and brought him and Hanueli to the top of the mountain. In front of him was a wide road. However, the moment he stepped on the road, Chu Fengmian felt a terrifying pressure. The pressure seemed to want to drive Chu Fengmian off the road and down the mountain. Chapter 775. The moment he stepped onto the mountain peak, he could feel an incomparably huge pressure. Even Chu Fengmian was almost driven off the road. However, when Chu Fengmian quickly familiarized himself with the pressure, he discovered that although the pressure wasn't strong, it was extremely stable. For warriors, it could only make them expend a little more effort, but it was far from being able to stop them. It seemed that this was one of the tests of Cloud Feather Palace. One had to withstand the pressure and ascend the mountain to experience the real test. Let's go! Chu Fengmian observed the surroundings for a while, then urged the Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot to rush up the mountain along the road. The Battle Dragon Treasure Chariot was a heaven-grade spiritual artifact. Although the pressure had some effect on the battle dragon treasure chariot, the effect was negligible. Its speed was much faster than most warriors. At a glance, countless warriors on the road were left far behind by the battle dragon treasure chariot. Many of them were overtaken. Good, let's take the lead, lest the treasures of Cloud Feather Palace fall into the hands of others. Chu Fengmian rejoiced. Fortunately, there was such a test on the mountain, which slowed down the speed of most warriors. Otherwise, it would not be easy for Chu Fengmian to catch up. Although luck was very important to enter the cave abodes of ancient sects, the first one to enter would be rewarded handsomely. For example, Chu Fengmian had entered Dragon Emperor Yan's cave abode before others to obtain the ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword and the Blood Sea. If Chu Fengmian had not obtained the countless treasures in Dragon Emperor Yan's cave abode, he might have died 10,000 times by now. This time, Chu Fengmian had to be the first to enter Cloud Feather Palace. Chu Fengmian's arrogance had attracted the hostility of many warriors on the road, especially those who were overtaken by Chu Fengmian. Their eyes were filled with killing intent. They naturally knew that whoever could be the first to enter an ancient cave abode would have the upper hand. Chu Fengmian could feel that countless murderous intents had already enveloped Chu Fengmian. At least 7 or 8 people had their eyes on Chu Fengmian, wanting to kill him. "Brat, get down!" Suddenly, a loud roar sounded in front of Chu Fengmian. Following a loud roar, a huge palm suddenly bombarded Chu Fengmian. The palm contained endless darkness. This massive palm wasn't just going to blast Chu Fengmian down. It was also going to blast the countless martialists behind Chu Fengmian down. Ancient Moon Shocking Palm, this is the disciple of Ancient Moon Valley, Gupeng. He is one of the top 3 disciples of Ancient Moon Valley. When Han Yuli saw the palm imprint approaching, she immediately recognized who the martial warriors who attacked was and spoke out. Gupeng Chu's eyes of Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. He hadn't even made a move to beat the others down, yet this Gupeng didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and dared to make a move against Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian let out a cold snort in the face of this incomparably huge palm. He also waved his hand, and countless ancient war dragon essence blood agglomerated, transforming into a war dragon claw that also struck out. Bang! When the two forces collided, the palm print was instantly shattered into pieces. Chu Fengmian snorted coldly, and the battle dragon's claw blasted forward. A figure suddenly fell from the mountain peak. His chest was smashed, and he was seriously injured. It was Gupeng. Gupeng was struck down from the mountain peak by Chu Fengmian's palm, and now he fell to the bottom of the mountain peak. This guy is not dead. Let him keep his life. Chu Fengmian snorted when he saw Gupeng fall. He did not want to chase after Gupeng. Cloud Feather Palace was more important to Chu Fengmian. As for Gupeng, Chu Fengmian could kill him when they meet. Let's go! The battle dragon treasure carriage suddenly accelerated, and rushed towards the top of the road. The other warriors saw Chu Fengmian's attack, and their killing intent left Chu Fengmian. Even Gupeng was struck down by Chu Fengmian's palm. They were either digging their own graves by attacking Chu Fengmian, or they could only watch as Chu Fengmian overtook them. Not long after Chu Fengmian rushed up, another dozen or so martial artists rushed up. Their speed was extremely fast, surpassing countless people one after another as they rushed up. These people were in a skyboat. With the help of several people, they resisted the pressure, and their speed was much faster than the warriors. They are from the desolate ancient sect. Seeing the arrival of this group of people, the other warriors retreated to the side, not daring to block the way. That guy is fast. The treasure carriage he is in should be the 9 Demon Cities' heavenly demon treasure carriage. I didn't expect it to fall into the hands of this guy. On the skyboat, a desolate ancient sect disciple sneered. I heard that the people of 9 Demon City were annihilated by this guy. This guy is arrogant. He said that he will kill all the people of the 7 major sections. Saint, you don't have to care about the words of this guy. He is just a kid from the North region. He thinks that he is so arrogant just because he has a fortuitous encounter. When he meets the saint, he is nothing but trash. When the saint strikes, you can easily kill him. Another desolate ancient sect disciple said disdainfully. The treasure carriage he is in will belong to the saint sooner or later. The heavenly demon treasure carriage is indeed a treasure. I heard that this guy has the dragon clan's treasure, the ancestral dragon supreme sword. Killing him will bring great benefits. Saint Lord Huang said coldly. Chase after him. This guy can't be far. Since he wants the treasures of Cloud Feather Palace, we will meet him sooner or later. When the time comes, I will kill him. As he spoke, the sky boat overtook countless warriors and rushed up. On the other side, Chu Fengmian also noticed the presence of the group of warriors behind him. However, Chu Fengmian didn't have the time to pay attention to them. Chu Fengmian was driving the treasure carriage and was about to reach the peak of the mountain. The pressure on the road was getting stronger and stronger, and it had reached its peak. Generally, weaker warriors would be able to make it to the top of the mountain through this pressure. However, the pressure was nothing in front of Chu Fengmian. Go! Chu Fengmian shouted coldly. The battle dragon chariot he was sitting on suddenly rushed forward, breaking through the pressure and breaking through the great Tao of pressure. Chapter 776. The moment Chu Fengmian rushed up the path, the surrounding pressure dissipated completely. The war dragon carriage rushed up to the peak of the mountain. At a glance, there was a rainbow staircase. At a glance, Chu Fengmian saw a shining black spirit stone at about 1/10 of the rainbow staircase. It was clearly visible. Shining black 10-direction stone? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but exclaim when he saw the spirit stone. The shining black 10-direction stone was one of the best treasures in the world. It contained a unique spiritual power that could purify the bloodline in a martialist's body. If an ordinary martialist's bloodline was purified by the shining black 10-direction stone, it would be comparable to the bloodline of a true dragon. For a martialist like Chu Fengmian, who had other bloodlines, the shining black 10-direction stone would be even more effective. Chu Fengmian cultivated the war dragon skill. Although the ancient war dragon bloodline that he possessed could be considered one of the best bloodlines in the world, there were still bloodlines that could surpass the war dragon bloodline. For example, the Kunpeng, the Sky Phoenix, and many other exotic beasts of heaven and earth had bloodlines that were stronger than the ancient war dragon bloodline. If Chu Fengmian could obtain the shining black 10-direction stone now, it would be enough to refine his bloodline once again. At that time, it would be enough to allow Chu Fengmian's strength to take a step forward. This dazzling black 10-directional stone was an absolute treasure to any martial artist. In the 9 regions, the shining black 10-direction stone had not appeared for tens of thousands of years. Chu Fengmian had only read about it in some ancient books. The Cloud Feather Palace was indeed rich. The shining black 10-direction stone was extremely precious even in ancient times. The shining black 10-direction stone was placed on the rainbow staircase. It was just at his fingertips. Chu Fengmian wasn't the only one who was looking at the shining black 10-direction stone. Almost all the martialists who had just rushed up the mountain were attracted by the shining black 10-direction stone. Their eyes were burning with desire. Such a treasure of heaven and earth was rare even in the returning ruined sky. It's the shining black 10-direction stone. Heavens, isn't this a mystical item that has long disappeared from the 9 realms? Legend has it that the brilliant black 10-direction stone doesn't belong to the 9 realms. It came from outside the 9 realms, and every time you use one, you'll have one less. Who would have thought that it would be here? I have the bloodline of the Sun Tiger. If I can get my hands on this shining black 10-direction stone, my bloodline will transform once again, and I will be invincible. Those martial artists all looked at the shining black omnidirectional stone, wishing they could snatch it away right now. Even Han Yueli looked at the shining black 10-sided stone with a burning gaze. His eyes were filled with desire. This shining black 10-directional stone was different from other rare items in the universe. Among the countless rare items in the universe, some were only useful to martial artists of certain realms. For example, the dragon birth grass that Chu Fengmian had obtained before was only useful to martial artists below life and death realm. Therefore, its value was limited. However, this shining black 10-direction stone was different. Its effect had nothing to do with a martial artist's realm or strength. What it did was transform one's bloodline. Even for some life-shattering realm experts, or even experts of higher realms, it was very useful. Everyone wanted to get their hands on it, and its value was immeasurable. However, even though there were so many people and so many gazes, they were at the very most only looking at him. None of them actually dared to step forward to fight for it. This scene surprised Chu Fengmian a little. The martial artists of the returning ruined sky were all lunatics. They would do anything for their own benefits. Just now, at the foot of the mountain, they could even fight to take a step forward. In the face of a treasure like the shining black 10-direction stone, they shouldn't be so calm. However, after a glance, Chu Fengmian saw the blood sacrifice on the rainbow staircase. It seemed that some martial artists had tried to step on the rainbow staircase, but they died on the spot. Not even their bones were left, and only some blood sacrifices were left. On the rainbow staircase, there was a 7-colored light that made people not dare to step on it. Once they did, they would have to bear an unparalleled bombardment. No one could withstand it. Because of this, although the martial artists were full of greed, none of them dared to take a step forward to fight for the shining black 10-direction stone. After observing this scene, the majority of the martial artists stood quietly to the side, waiting. They knew that the various changes in Cloud Feather Sky Palace should be a sign that the inheritance was about to open, or had already opened. Climbing up the mountain was the first test. Martial artists who didn't pass this test didn't even have the chance to see the shining black 10-direction stone. Most of the martial artists calmed down and waited to the side. However, there were some who couldn't bear it and wanted to take the risk. The moment one of the martial artists stepped on the rainbow staircase, his body was completely obliterated, leaving only a few drops of blood on the ground. The power of the 7-colored light on the rainbow staircase was not something that the martial artists could withstand. Chu Fengmian saw this scene and knew it clearly. He sat in the War Dragon treasure carriage and waited quietly to the side. Whoosh! 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 A huge skyship suddenly rushed up. On the skyship, more than 20 figures appeared. These people were the desolate ancient sect's disciples who wanted to deal with Chu Fengmian. Humph! When the desolate ancient sect's disciples saw Chu Fengmian, their eyes were filled with killing intent. Spiritual energy surged in their bodies, and they were about to attack. However, the young man beside him shook his head. In the end, the group of people stood to the side. Lord Huang is here. When the martial artists saw the young man, their eyes were filled with fear. Lord Huang, Sword Ancestor Huang, and War God Lu. These 3 people were high and mighty in the Heavenly Feather domain. Any martial artist who wanted to make an enemy of them would need to carefully consider it before doing so. Other than the desolate ancient sect's disciples, another group of martial artists gradually entered. This group of people had deep eyes. They were the disciples of the ancient Moon Valley. Among the crowd was Gupeng, who was knocked down from the mountain by Chu Fengmian. His face was still pale, but his injuries were much better. He must have taken some elixirs. The moment he came up, he also looked at Chu Fengmian and gave him a death glare, then stood aside. Looks like Gupeng won't let this go, Han Yueli said when he saw this scene. No matter. He's just an ant. Whoever dares to block me will die, Chu Fengmian said calmly. Chu Fengmian didn't put Gupeng in his eyes. Chapter 777. More and more warriors had gathered at the top of the mountain. Warriors from the Valley of the Medicine Masters and Alpha Hall had also arrived. There were about 200 people at the top of the mountain. Chu Fengmian had estimated that there were close to 1,000 warriors who had gathered at the foot of the mountain. Now, only 200 or so had come up. The rest would not be able to pass the first test. However, the number of people was still increasing. The final number would probably be much higher than this. That is Yao Hai from the Valley of the Medicine Masters. It is said that he has already refined heaven-level spirit pills at such a young age. A moment after the disciples of the Valley of the Medicine Masters had passed, a warrior pointed to the young man in the lead and said, "This young man had elegant features. Like the other warriors, he came from a family of good standing." The Valley of the Medicine Masters was one of the 7 major sects. It was not known for its strength but its medical skills. Countless alchemy sects in the 9 regions had all originated from the Valley of the Medicine Masters or were inextricably linked to the Valley of the Medicine Masters. It could be said that among the 7 major sects, the Valley of the Medicine Masters was the one that should not be provoked. Whoever killed a disciple of the Valley of the Medicine Masters was like poking a hornet's nest. Countless powerhouses would seek revenge. Why would the disciples of the Valley of the Medicine Masters come to the bottomless ruined sky? A warrior could not help but ask in confusion. In the bottomless ruined sky, other warriors are not afraid of their status, especially the disciples of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Each of them is wealthy. There are many people who want to kill them. Kill? Do you really think that the people of the Valley of the Medicine Masters are all powerless people? A warrior next to him snorted when he heard this. In addition to their medical skills, the disciples of the Valley of the Medicine Masters are all masters of poison. Since Yao Hai can refine heaven-level spirit pills, he can naturally refine heaven-level toxins. Who among you is confident that they can withstand heaven-level toxins? Heaven-level toxins. Hearing this warrior's words, the other warriors shut their mouths. No one dared to question him. Poison masters were the last people in the 9 regions that any warrior would want to offend. This was because the toxins that a powerful poison master refined and the poison techniques he used were almost always invisible. If they were to offend a powerful poison master, they wouldn't know when they would be poisoned and die. Healers were even more proficient in poisons, and the disciples of Medicine King's Valley could be said to be the best in the 9 zones in terms of poisons. Provoking them would be courting death. Chu Fengmian was naturally aware of this. Back when the 7 major sects had besieged the Master of the Sword Dao, the Valley of the Medicine Masters had contributed greatly. Back then, the old-timers from Medicine King's Valley had taken out some of the poisons they had passed down since ancient times. They had accidentally poisoned the Lord of the Sword Dao, causing him to be surrounded and killed by the 7 great sections. Killing intent appeared in Chu Fengmian's eyes. There were disciples of the 7 great sects present, and none of them could leave this place alive. In addition to the disciples of the Valley of the Medicine Masters, the disciples of Dubhe Hall had also come. Everyone could only describe Dubhe Hall as mysterious. Dubhe Hall's cultivation method was to communicate with the power of the stars in the sky. In the eyes of countless warriors, this was just an illusory legend. However, it was precisely because of this that Dubhe Hall was able to truly rise among the 9 regions. Now, no one dared to look down on them. In particular, most of the warriors did not know how to make an enemy of the Dubhe Hall disciples. Each and every one of them was extremely fearful and could only avoid them. The leader of the Dubhe Hall disciples is called Xingyun. When I was being hunted down, I met her once. However, she did not kill me. Instead, she gave me an elixir and let me go. Seeing the Dubhe Hall disciples pass by, Han Yueli suddenly spoke. If you meet her, it's best to let her live. After all, I owe her a favor. Oh? Hearing Han Yueli's words, Chu Fengmian glanced over and saw a woman in the center of the Dubhe Hall disciples. This woman was dressed in a starry robe and looked extremely mysterious. Even Chu Fengmian could not see her face clearly. With Chu Fengmian's spiritual consciousness, even if a life-saving realm warrior were to come, Chu Fengmian could see through them directly. However, Chu Fengmian could not see through Xingyun. Clearly, this person's physique was extremely special. Even Chu Fengmian could not see through her. Since she helped you once, I also owe her a favor. As long as she does not make an enemy of me, I will not kill her. Chu Fengmian said softly. Chu Fengmian was bloodthirsty, but he would not kill innocent people indiscriminately. Xingyun had saved Hanueli once, so Chu Fengmian naturally would not kill her. The moment Chu Fengmian looked at Xingyun, she seemed to turn her head and look in Chu Fengmian's direction. Then, she led the Dubhe Hall disciples to a corner of the mountain peak. 4 of the 7 major sects had all arrived. Only the disciples of the 9 Demons City, the Tianjian sect, and the Sage Monarch sect were left. Not a single person was seen. Why are the disciples of the 9 Demons City, the Tianjian sect, and the Sage Monarch sect not here? Some cultivators had also noticed this. The opening of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace was definitely the biggest event in the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain. Countless warriors had come to the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain for the treasures and inheritances of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. It was impossible for them not to come. Suddenly, many people thought of a recent rumor that the disciples of the 9 Demons City, the Tianjian sect, and the Sage Monarch sect had all been killed by a single warrior. This rumor had started to spread in the past 2 days, but to the warriors, it was like a joke. In the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain, the disciples of the 7 major sects were the leaders. They were numerous and powerful. Not to mention a single person, even a single force would not be able to compete with the 7 major sections. But now, the disciples of the 9 Demons City, the Tianjian sect, and the Sage Monarch sect had not appeared. This made many people think of this rumor. Many martialists looked around, wanting to see who the rumored martialist was. Although there were rumors, no one knew who had killed them. Some of their gazes fell on Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian, such a strange face, was naturally suspicious. But when they looked at Chu Fengmian's cultivation level, they stopped looking. 5th level life and death realm. In the Heavenly Feather Divine Domain, he could only be ranked at the bottom. How could such a person destroy the 3 major forces by himself? Everyone looked at each other suspiciously, but no one really talked about it. Most people's attention was focused on the Rainbow Stairs. After 70,000 years, someone has finally set foot in the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. A mysterious voice suddenly came from the sky. The appearance of this voice caused the faces of countless people present to be filled with incomparable shock. Chapter 778. The sudden appearance of this voice attracted the attention of everyone present. No one had expected that there would be such a voice in Cloud Feather Palace. Countless pairs of eyes looked over and saw a figure walking down the rainbow staircase of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. Someone's here? Chu Fengmian was a little surprised when he saw the figure. Cloud Feather Palace was a sect that had disappeared from the 9 regions for a full 70,000 years. Who would have thought that there would still be someone in Cloud Feather Palace? Even the most powerful warriors could not survive 70,000 years. Even the invincible figures who were once at the peak of the 9 regions could live for 70,000 years. Chu Fengmian was not the only one who was surprised. Countless people present were surprised when they saw the figure. Welcome to Cloud Feather Palace. You are the first guests in 70,000 years. This old man has been waiting for you for a long time. The figure was an old man with a head full of white hair. He looked very old, but no one dared to underestimate his existence. They had watched the old man descend from the rainbow staircase with their own eyes. The rainbow-colored light above had no effect on the old man. This meant that the old man's identity was at least closely related to Cloud Feather Palace. Cloud Feather Palace had not been open for 70,000 years. Now that the old man had appeared, who would dare to underestimate him? Even Chu Fengmian looked at the old man with a grave expression. Even with his current spiritual consciousness, he could not tell the old man's identity at a glance. Chu Fengmian could not even tell the old man's cultivation level. At a glance, the old man looked like an ordinary old man who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken. However, this was the Cloud Plume Palace. How could a powerless old man appear here? It was impossible. May I ask who you are? Sage Huang was the first to speak when he saw the figure. Sage Huang was the first to speak. Countless warriors present had already turned their eyes to the old man. Like Chu Fengmian, All the warriors present wanted to know the old man's identity. "I'm just a housekeeper left behind by the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. Everyone is here for the treasures of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace, am I right?" The old man smiled and said, "The Cloud Feather Palace hasn't been open for 70,000 years. You are the first batch of warriors to enter. Not bad. All the treasures and even the inheritances of the Cloud Feather Palace are inside." Treasure? Butler? Could he be the one who opened the Cloud Feather Palace? Could it be a trap? No matter what, we have to try our luck at the Cloud Feather Palace. Whoever obtains the inheritance will be invincible in the 9 zones. Many of the warriors present began to discuss among themselves. The appearance of this old man had indeed struck fear in their hearts. However, none of them would choose to cower in the face of the treasures of Cloud Feather Palace. Artifact spirit? Just as Chu Fengmian was lost in thought, Xing Xian's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. The Xing Xian who had been sleeping all along suddenly woke up now. Artifact spirit? What did you say? Chu Fengmian was puzzled when he heard Xing Xian's words. Why, kid? Can't you tell? Isn't the old man in front of you an artifact spirit? Xing Xian said in a mocking tone. I thought you knew a lot. I didn't expect you to be so blind. The old man in front of him was an artifact spirit? Chu Fengmian suddenly looked at the old man. At a glance, he did not feel any spiritual energy from the old man. He did not even feel the life of a warrior. He seemed to be illusory. This feeling was indeed very similar to that of an artifact spirit. Was he just an artifact spirit? How could it transform into something like a martial artist? Usually, when an artifact spirit appeared, almost all warriors would be able to recognize it at a glance. After all, the aura of an artifact spirit was completely different from that of a warrior. However, none of the warriors present could recognize that the old man in front of them was actually an artifact spirit. Even Chu Fengmian would not have realized this if Xing Xian had not reminded him. An artifact spirit can transform into a warrior's appearance? Chu Fengmian was astonished. How powerful must an artifact spirit be to be able to transform into a warrior's appearance? At the same time, Cloud Feather Palace had been destroyed for 70,000 years. Even an artifact spirit might not be able to survive for 70,000 years. Don't be surprised. This guy's body is already close to an extreme-grade immortal weapon. Let alone 70,000 years, even if it's 100,000 years, it won't be destroyed. Xing Xian's voice sounded in Chu Fengmian's mind. I didn't expect your luck to be so good. You actually encountered such a spirit artifact. A spirit artifact close to an extreme-grade immortal weapon? Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with excitement when he heard Xing Xian's evaluation. His ancestral dragon's supreme sword and battle dragon treasure chariot could be considered the best among heaven-grade spirit artifacts. Even so, these 2 spirit artifacts were still not close to an extreme-grade immortal weapon. After all, an extreme-grade immortal weapon was completely different from a heaven-grade spirit artifact. The gap between an earth-grade spirit artifact and a heaven-grade spirit artifact was even wider. What kind of treasure could give birth to such a powerful artifact spirit in Cloud Feather Palace? Chu Fengmian thought about it, but he could not remember what kind of powerful spirit artifact was recorded in Cloud Feather Palace. There was no spirit artifact that could be of such a grade. Unless, Chu Fengmian suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Cloud Feather Palace in the sky. Could this old man be the artifact spirit of Cloud Feather Palace? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked as he looked at the Cloud Feather Palace in the sky. It was made up of hundreds of palaces. Looks like you're not stupid. Xing Xian snorted coldly. You've hit the jackpot this time. The old man is obviously trying to find a successor for the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. If you're lucky, you might be able to obtain the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. When that happens, the entire Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace will belong to you. The inheritance of the entire Cloud Feather Palace. Chu Fengmian's eyes were burning with desire. the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace was definitely more useful than any other treasure. Do you want to obtain the treasures of Cloud Feather Palace? The old man looked at the crowd below and suddenly laughed. Chapter 779. The Treasures of Cloud Feather Palace. The power of Cloud Feather Palace was much more terrifying than the combined power of the 7 major sections. There was no one who did not want to get their hands on the treasures. There are many treasures in Cloud Feather Palace, but we will never give them to trash. Only true geniuses are qualified to get the treasures of Cloud Feather Palace. The elder snorted coldly. There are already 100,000 levitation crystals in Cloud Feather Palace. Whoever obtains the most levitation crystals will be able to obtain the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace. When that time comes, the entire Cloud Feather Palace will belong to him. Levitation crystals. Chu Fengmian had heard that the levitation crystals were a special product of Cloud Feather Palace. They could be used to forge heaven-grade spiritual weapons. Only Cloud Feather Palace could produce them. However, the value of the levitation crystals was more than that. Whoever got the most levitation crystals would get the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace. Once he got the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace, the entire Cloud Feather Palace would belong to him. Compared to this, all treasures and miraculous items of the heavens were nothing. The 100,000 levitation crystals would definitely cause a bloody battle in Cloud Feather Palace. However, no one was afraid of it. Everyone present was a genius of the 9 regions. Who did not want to get the treasures of Cloud Feather Palace? The greatest treasure of Cloud Feather Palace, the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace, was right in front of everyone. No one would choose to give it up now. Greed and possessiveness could be seen in every warrior's eyes. Everyone wanted the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace. Among the crowd, Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. He was determined to get the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace. He would not give it up to others. Whoever dares to fight with me for the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace will die. Chu Fengmian said to himself. At the same time, countless cold gazes swept across the crowd. Lord Huang, Yao Hai, and the others were determined to get the inheritance of Cloud Feather Palace. While everyone was talking, the elder spoke again. Since you are all here, I have left a gift for you. There are 3 treasures on the rainbow stairs. Anyone can get them. As the old man spoke, he waved his hand and the rainbow-colored light on the rainbow stairs suddenly shattered. The path to Cloud Feather Palace was now unobstructed. In the beginning, everyone could only see the front half of the rainbow staircase. Thus, they only discovered that 1/10 of the rainbow staircase was filled with shining black 10-sided stones. In the middle and at the end of the rainbow staircase, there were 2 more treasures. Celestial Fruit. Azure Sparrow Blood. When Chu Fengmian saw the other 2 treasures, he couldn't help but be surprised. The Cloud Feather Palace was indeed worthy of being one of the top sects of the 9 zones. The treasure placed in the middle of the rainbow staircase was a colorless fruit. It was the size of a fist and looked ordinary, but it was actually a treasure of heaven and earth. The heavenly realm fruit was actually not something from the heavenly realm. Instead, everyone felt that the medicinal power contained within it was definitely not the 9 regions' spiritual medicine. That was why they had changed its name to the Heavenly Realm Fruit. Once consumed, this Heavenly Realm Fruit could completely change a cultivator's body, opening up at least 30 spirit veins. Chu Fengmian had once taken the 9 transformation heaven seizing pill, and one of the important spiritual medicines was this Heavenly Realm Fruit. It had the power to seize the heavens. Even a pig could become a supreme being among the demonic beasts after eating the Heavenly Realm Fruit. To countless cultivators, this Heavenly Realm Fruit was extremely attractive. Lastly, the Azure Sparrow Blood was even more shocking. The Azure Sparrow was one of the ancient demonic beasts. Few people in the 9 zones knew of its name. However, the ancestor of the Azure Sparrow, the Azure Luan, was a terrifying existence whose name shook the 9 zones. The Azure Luan was a supreme divine beast of heaven and earth, the darling of the heavens. In history, the Azure One of any era was an expert at the top of the 9 zones. 10,000 years ago, Chu Fengmian's good friend, the Azure One, was someone who could compete with any expert of the 9 zones. If the Azure One hadn't fought with the previous owner of the mysterious star sword, the bloodthirsty sword demon, it probably wouldn't have died. The Azure Sparrow was the descendant of the Azure One's bloodline. With the Azure One's blood, it could be considered the best among the countless bloodlines in the world. The Azure Sparrow's blood also had a terrifying characteristic, which was atavism. Every 10,000 years, or tens of thousands of years, a Azure Sparrow would be born in the Azure Sparrow clan and become the Azure One. If that warrior obtained the Azure Sparrow's blood, it was very likely that he would succeed in atavism. At that time, he wouldn't have the Azure Sparrow's bloodline, but the Azure One's bloodline, which was one of the most terrifying bloodlines in the world. The Azure Sparrow's blood was much more terrifying than the celestial fruit. Especially now, there were a total of 3 treasures on the rainbow stairs. The Azure Sparrow's blood, the celestial fruit, and the shining black stone. If a venerated warrior obtained these 3 treasures, with the celestial fruit, he could open up his aptitude. With the Azure Sparrow's blood, he could turn it into his bloodline. With the shining black stone, he could purify the bloodline. It was very likely that the Azure Sparrow's bloodline would undergo atavism. At that time, a super genius with unparalleled aptitude would be born. Even now, Chu Fengmian had the ancient battle dragon's bloodline and his body had been tempered by countless treasures. However, if someone were to truly be able to obtain those 3 treasures, they would likely be much more terrifying than Chu Fengmian. The Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace had actually left these 3 treasures on the 7-colored staircase. In fact, it meant that whoever could obtain these 3 treasures would have the highest chance of obtaining the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. Shining black stone, Azure Sparrow's blood, and celestial fruit. Chu Fengmian wasn't the only one who noticed this. Many of the experts present had also noticed this. Lord Huan's eyes were burning with passion. The look in his eyes showed that he had already taken these 3 treasures as his own. If a piece of trash obtained these 3 treasures, he could become the most monstrous genius in the 9 regions. Moreover, if Lord Huan obtained them, why bother? In this era, he would be the ruler and no one would be able to stop him. It seems that everyone wants these 3 treasures as well. The old man looked at everyone's eyes and said with a smile, "Go and fight for it. Whoever can fight to the end will be able to obtain the treasures of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. Go!" After the old man finished speaking, his body moved and landed on the rainbow stairs. With a leap, he entered the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. The old man's departure caused the place to suddenly become silent. Almost in the next instant, countless amounts of spiritual energy suddenly erupted. Countless figures dashed toward the rainbow stairs. Whoosh! 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 These warriors rushed over like locusts. Each of them was as anxious as if they were rushing to be reincarnated. Chapter 780. The glittering black 10-sided stone, the blood of the green sparrow, and the heavenly fruit. Every martial artist present knew the value of these 3 treasures. Whoever obtained these 3 treasures, even if they did not obtain the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace, would be able to reach the top in a single bound. Although the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace was good, it was still illusory. These 3 treasures could be seen right in front of their eyes. In an instant, more than a dozen warriors took action at the same time. Their bodies moved as they stepped onto the rainbow staircase and rushed up. "A bunch of ants, how dare you compete with me?" All of a sudden, a cold snort burst out. Lord Huang, who was standing at the side, roared coldly. Countless disciples of the desolate ancient sect around him took action as well. Countless martial techniques were thrown at the rainbow staircase. The bodies of the dozen or so warriors that had rushed in were instantly shattered by the countless martial skills, and they were killed on the spot. Damn it! Those people from the desolate ancient sect. Those who were not affected by the martial techniques felt a lingering fear. These disciples of the desolate ancient sect were too ruthless. They killed with a single blow and did not give them any chance. However, this domineering style was the style of the 7 major sections. Whoever dares to compete with me will die. Lord Huang looked at the surrounding martial artists and snorted coldly. His body suddenly moved as he walked towards the rainbow staircase. Oh? Lord Huang, others may be afraid of you, but I am not. Just as Saint Lord Huang finished speaking, another figure suddenly appeared from the side. This figure was Yao Hai, a disciple of the Medicine King Valley, one of the 7 major sections. Almost at the same time, his body also walked towards the rainbow staircase. Yao Hai? Lord Huang saw Yao Hai and sneered. You think you can compete with me? Why wouldn't I dare? The treasures of the Cloud Feather Palace are available to everyone. It is not only the desolate ancient sect that can obtain them. Another voice sounded. A woman's figure suddenly rushed forward. It was Xingyan from the Alpha Hall. Now, she also took a step forward. Her speed was not any slower than Yao Hai and Lord Huang. If it was Sage Lord Huang, the disciples of the other sects might be fearful of him. However, the disciples of the 7 major sects might not really care about it. Clearly, Yao Hai and Xingyan did not care about Sage Huang's threat at all. Xingyan, you want to make an enemy out of me as well? Sage Huang sneered. I didn't expect that after Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Deer, those 2 pieces of trash, you would run out to oppose me. Become enemies? The treasures of the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace will depend on our own abilities. Sage Huang, there is no need for you to threaten us. Another figure stood out from the crowd of Guyu Canyon disciples. It was the leader of the Guyu Canyon disciples, Gu Bai. The experts of the 7 great sects all came out one after another. Let's rely on our own abilities. Very well, I'm just reminding everyone out of goodwill. If you want to fight for it, that's fine. However, don't blame me for being ruthless when the time comes. Sage Huang swept his gaze across the crowd and coldly snorted. He didn't waste any more words. With a move of his body, he charged up the rainbow stairs. On the other hand, Gu Bai, Xingyan and Yao Hai did not show any signs of weakness. With a move of their bodies, they all chased after him. The 3 treasures in front of them seemed to have turned into a fight between the 4 of them. The other cultivators stood below. Their eyes were filled with unwillingness, but no one took the initiative to attack. Most of the cultivators present did not have the chance to fight against the 4 of them. Especially since the 4 of them represented the 7 major sects. At this moment, whoever dared to come out and fight with them would be making an enemy out of the 7 major sects. In the 9 regions, those who dared to make an enemy out of the 7 major sects were simply courting death. Just when everyone thought that the 3 treasures would definitely fall into the hands of the 4 of them. Another figure charged out from the crowd. The Battle Dragon treasure carriage roared. Its speed was extremely fast. Like a ray of light, it stepped onto the rainbow stairs. Who is it? Someone else dares to attack? Who is it? Countless gazes suddenly looked over. This figure was naturally Chu Fengmian and Han Yueli. The 2 of them sat on the Battle Dragon treasure carriage and directly charged up the rainbow stairs. Chu Fengmian was determined to obtain these 3 treasures. How could he let others have them? A 5th level life and death brat? What is this brat doing? Courting death? When many people saw Chu Fengmian's unfamiliar face, a mocking smile appeared on their faces. With such strength, daring to compete with the 4 of them was simply courting death. Even Saint Lord Huang and the other 3 turned their heads. When they saw Chu Fengmian, they were somewhat astonished. Their gazes were ice cold. A 5th level life and death brat dares to compete with us? Courting death? Gu Bai of the ancient Moon Valley coldly snorted. He suddenly condensed his spirit power and sent a palm strike at Chu Fengmian. When this palm strike was sent out, the surrounding light seemed to be devoured. An earth-shattering darkness engulfed Chu Fengmian, pushing him into the darkness. This palm strike pushed Chu Fengmian into the extreme darkness. It seemed as if he would be trapped in the darkness forever, unable to escape. Chu Fengmian sat on the battle dragon treasure carriage. Facing this palm strike, he remained motionless, allowing it to strike him. Just as this endless darkness was about to envelop Chu Fengmian's body, the battle dragon treasure carriage he was sitting on suddenly roared. The 8 primordial battle dragons uttered roars simultaneously. The surrounding darkness was instantly dispersed. Chu Fengmian was completely unharmed. Even the battle dragon treasure carriage he was sitting on didn't stop. It directly charged up the rainbow stairs, closing in on them. What kind of spirit tool is this? Treasure carriage? 9 Demon Cities Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage? How could this heavenly demon treasure carriage be in your hands and transform into this? Gu Bai looked at Chu Fengmian with a face full of shock. His attack was easily broken by this treasure carriage. Only the 9 Demon Cities Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage could do this. However, the Battle Dragon Treasure Carriage Chu Fengmian was sitting on right now was completely different from the Battle Dragon Treasure Carriage from before. He couldn't recognize it for a moment. So what if you have the Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage? Do you think you can contend against us with just a spirit tool? Gu Bai roared and attacked once again. Endless spirit power gathered in his palm and immediately turned into a black crescent moon. It immediately descended, bombarding Chu Fengmian. Break for me. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian stood up from the battle dragon treasure carriage and rushed over with a single step. His right hand immediately turned into a battle dragon claw. With a claw strike, the black crescent moon was directly shattered, forcing Gu Bai to retreat repeatedly. The spirit power on his body directly collapsed. Chapter 781. What? How is this possible? Gu Bai was forced to retreat by Chu Fengmian. Countless martial artists in the crowd widened their eyes and went into an uproar. Especially the Gu Moon Canyon disciples, their faces were filled with disbelief. Gu Bai did not hold back when he attacked, using the Gu Moon Canyon's ultimate technique. But he was forced to retreat by Chu Fengmian in a few moves. Gu Bai's reputation in the Heavenly Feather Divine region was below Lord Huang, but he was still one of the top figures in the Heavenly Feather Divine region. Now, he was forced to retreat by an unknown kid. Die! Chu Fengmian saw that Gu Bai was forced to retreat and attacked again. Another palm fell from the sky. The battle dragon claw fell from the sky, covering the sky and splitting the sun. It was as if no power could compete with it. Behind Chu Fengmian, a group of dragons roared, making Chu Fengmian look like the Dragon Emperor. Dragon Clan martial technique? Kid, don't be arrogant. Gu Moon descend, strengthen my body. A black crescent moon shadow appeared behind Gu Bai's back. The moment the black crescent moon appeared, Gu Bai's aura surged several times. Gu Moon descend. This is the Gu Moon Canyon's ultimate technique. Legend has it that there is a Gu Moon in the world that contains endless power. Only the Gu Moon Canyon's secret technique can use its power. I thought it was just a rumor, I didn't expect it to be true. When some of the martial artists saw Gu Yu appear behind Gu Bai, they were extremely shocked. It was somewhat unexpected. After all, the Gu Moon descend was not real. But now, Gu Bai's surging power could not be fake. This was the best proof of the Gu Moon's existence. The Gu Moon descend brought out the strongest power in Gu Bai's body. This was Gu Bai's true strength. Compared to War God Lu, Sword Ancestor Huang and the others, he was not inferior. Kid, it's your honor to be able to force me to use the Gu Moon descend. Die! Gu Bai snorted coldly, his face flushed red. He was really angry. Otherwise, he would not have used his trump card to deal with Chu Fengmian. He summoned the Gu Moon descend to kill Chu Fengmian. The power of Gu Yu? Seeing the changes in Gu Bai's power, he stood in place with his hands behind his back. His expression did not change at all. Even if Gu Bai's strength was comparable to Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Lu, so what? Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Deer had both died at Chu Fengmian's hands. Gu Bai could only suffer the same fate. All the disciples of the 7 great sects of the Skywing Dominion must die. I'll kill you first on the rainbow stairs. Chu Fengmian sneered. His body moved once again. At this moment, the battle dragon bloodline in his body was fully unleashed. Continuous dragon roars could be heard. The spiritual energy around Chu Fengmian transformed into true dragons. The ancestral dragon supreme sword was unsheathed in his hand. With a swing of the sword, a flock of dragons danced in the air. Each dragon was an extremely sharp sword chi. All of them charged toward Gu Bai's body to kill him. What? What kind of swordsmanship was this? Are you the one who killed Sword Ancestor Desolate and War God Lu? When Gu Bai heard Chu Fengmian's words, he suddenly understood Chu Fengmian's identity. Rumor had it that War God Lu and Sword Ancestor Desolate were killed by a martial artist. That martial artist had declared that he would kill all the disciples of the 7 great sections. Hearing this, Gu Bai immediately knew Chu Fengmian's identity. The martial artist in the rumor was Chu Fengmian. Brat, you've also killed our ancient Moon Valley's disciples. Today, I'll kill you and avenge the 7 great sects. As Gu Bai spoke, his voice suddenly became several times louder as he shouted. Sage Huang, Xinyan, Yao Hai, are you guys going to sit by and do nothing? This person is a great enemy of our 7 great sections. Let's kill him first and then fight for the treasures of the Cloud Feather Palace. How about it? When Gu Bai saw Chu Fengmian's sword chi, he understood that Chu Fengmian's strength was not easy to deal with. It was impossible for him to kill Chu Fengmian alone. Now, he naturally had to join forces with others to attack Chu Fengmian. All right. Sage Huang was the first to agree without hesitation. He had always regarded Chu Fengmian as a great threat. Now was the best chance to kill Chu Fengmian. Naturally, he would not reject it. A huge path suddenly appeared under his feet. It was the Ancient Desolate sect's ultimate skill, the Ancient Desolate Path. Sage Huang stood on the Ancient Desolate Path as if he was in another space. It was extremely mysterious and his body contained a mysterious ancient power. Ancient Chaos Torrent. Sage Huang attacked and an endless stream of ancient power rushed down. It was like a torrent that wanted to crush Chu Fengmian and suppress him. Yao Hai, who was beside him, hesitated for a moment before attacking as well. Purple miasma condensed around Yao Hai and turned into a purple spear, thrusting towards Chu Fengmian. In the end, Xingyan thought about it for a moment and also made a move. Suddenly, one of the stars in the sky suddenly fell and smashed down on Chu Fengmian. The experts of the 7 great sects had joined forces to attack Chu Fengmian. In the eyes of the crowd below, there was no need to think about the result. Which one of the experts of the 7 great sects wasn't an invincible figure in the life and death realm? Each and every one of them had the strength to shake life-shatterer realm geniuses. Now that everyone was attacking Chu Fengmian together, Chu Fengmian's death was inevitable. Kid, you're courting death. Do you think we'll let you go after killing so many disciples of our 7 great sects? Daring to make an enemy of our 7 great sects, your end is already decided. Gu Bai sneered disdainfully. Gu Bai was the clearest about the strength of the 4 of them. Not to mention a life and death realm martial artist, even a life-shatterer martial artist could die if they were careless. Moreover, Chu Fengmian was only at the 5th level of life and death realm. Even if he used the treasure carriage, it would still shatter. Courting death. Hearing Gu Bai's arrogant voice, Chu Fengmian coldly snorted. Facing the 4 of them, his face was as calm as ever. It was as if he didn't even put this kind of attack in his eyes. So what if the 4 of them joined forces? He, Chu Fengmian, had never been afraid of anything. Sky-shattering sword. Chu Fengmian let out a loud shout as the sword in his hand was unsheathed once again. This sword light suddenly shot out and turned into a 10,000 Jianwang sword chi in the air. Facing the countless attacks, it fiercely chopped down. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.